to the afternoon session of the Global News Forum. I hope you enjoyed lunch. Thank you. Again, I'm Claire Pachimanon, the editor of Thai PBS World, and I'll be your MC for this afternoon session. Okay, so the next panel is a Thai PBS Forum, Truth, Trust, and Democracy. Your moderator is an award-winning journalist, editorial leader, and the executive advisor of Thai PBS. And of course, he's my boss as well. Let's give them a warm welcome, Mr. Thep Chaiyong.
Okay, good afternoon once again. I hope you enjoy your lunch. This hotel is supposed to have very good buffet for lunch. All right, so we have 4 speakers in this afternoon session. First is Dr. Surachani Hamali Siyai, who is a visiting fellow at the ISIS Yusof Ishak Institute at the National University of Singapore, where she works on digital politics in the media technology and society program. And next is Kun Kavi Jongkitawon, an expert on regional affairs. And Kun Kavi is a former journalist, having served as an executive editor of The Nation, a Bangkok-based newspaper which no longer exists, which only shows you the sorry state of the Thai media at the present. And he also served as the director of Myanmar Times based in Rangoon. And then we have Dr. Fuadi Pisuwan, president of the Surin Pisuwan Foundation, a philanthropic organization working on issues related to education, conflict resolution, and human security in ASEAN. And last but not least, Nesrin Bozian, lead international services and strategy of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC Australia. So welcome all of you. Thank you. So this afternoon's topic is truth, trust, and democracy. These 3 things are essentially interrelated in societies where the media play a crucial role in promoting and nurturing democracy. And the media do so by reporting the truth and serving as a check on the powerful and providing forum for members of the public to exchange views and their diverse opinions. All this is done, to make sure that the public can make informed decisions, which is something very crucial in any democracy. But the bad news is that the trust in the media in countries across the world, Thailand and Australia included, has been on a consistent decline. And in the process, the faith in democracy also declines. And this is all because fewer and fewer people trust the media to report the truth. And people have come to believe that the media, in many cases anyway, have become more biased and more partisan. And all this happens in the face of the rise in the influence of social media, which, as we all know, and we have been talking this since this morning, that it has been the source of misinformation, disinformation, and fake news. So this afternoon, our speakers will offer their views on the responsibilities and challenges the media face in trying to restore trust and faith in democracy. But first and foremost, trust and faith in themselves, all right? I will start by having our speakers talk about the things that they have in their prepared remarks. I'll start with Dr. Surachani then, okay.
All right, thank you, Khun Thep Chai, and good afternoon. It's my honor to be here this afternoon with you guys, and honestly, I'm a little bit intimidated to be in the same room with you guys, such a seasoned media practitioners here. The fact that I have remarked script in hand shows how nervous I am. But while I'm here, I would like to, as a digital politics enthusiast, I would like to highlight some of the points about the role of media in the digital age to uphold the truth and also rebuild public trust in our democratic institutions. And of course, just like Khun Thep Chai just mentioned, the media has always been regarded as the fourth estate of democracy, as crucial gatekeeper that holds power accountable and informs citizens. Yet, the trust in media in the recent years have been in decline. And this decline is not just a matter of public opinion, but it strikes at the heart of our democratic principles. The latest survey by the Reuters Institute reports that politics, of course, unsurprisingly, remains the topic that people are most concerned about when it comes to the content that they consume, for it to be fake or misleading, along with others such as health information or the news about the war in Gaza and Ukraine as well. To address this crisis, right, the media itself must also first grapple with their own challenges. And with the digital age that have bring about unprecedented speech and reach of the news dissemination, it has also brought about, of course, a proliferation of unreliable sources and misleading contents. Citizen journalists and independent news outlets can now be double-edged sword, and social media platforms tend to amplify the problem as they prioritize virality of content over accuracy. Journalists today, as we in this room, I was hearing what you guys are talking about this morning as well, have faced an immense pressure to break news first. The round-the-clock news cycle demands constant updates, leading to rushed reporting and sometimes sensationalism. In this environment, mistakes are inevitable, but they come at a cost as well. And that cost means an undermining of the credibility of the entire profession. Yet, I think it's very important for professional journalists not to be discouraged from producing high-quality, truthful content. Many media organizations are now doubling down on rigorous journalistic standards. They're investing in fact-checking teams, promoting transparency about their sources, and engaging more deeply with their audiences, which is great. And I think these are crucial steps towards rebuilding trust, and we need more of that. We people need more of that, while also being mindful of the disparity of resources across the news ecosystem as well. But the responsibility, I'm at this point where the responsibility doesn't solely rest on journalists and newsrooms. Ordinary citizens, as consumer of news, we also bear responsibility too. While governments also look to media literacy as an antidote to combat the infodemic, I think it's even more important to cultivate the culture of critical thinking. And what I like to call vigilant information intake. Teaching ourselves and our community, especially the young generation, to actively discern credible sources from misinformation and to resist the temptation to share sensational headlines without verifying the accuracy. With the domain and the way that the young people prefer to consume information and news, they can be even more susceptible to this and misinformation. Relatedly, tech companies and social media companies also play a role in this as well. The report from Reuters Institute, as just mentioned earlier, also showed that social media platforms have become primarily news sources for many people. Thailand, for example, 39% of the respondents in that survey that age below 25 consume their news primarily from TikTok, while the global average is only 23%. In the grand scheme of things, right, the concerning part is that most of the content regulations applied to legacy media and traditional media do not apply to content on social media platforms. So I think it's also time to push platforms to prioritize the promotion of accurate information over viral contents. Algorithms should also be designed not just to maximize engagement, but to ensure that users are exposed to diverse viewpoints and reliable sources. Ultimately, restoring trust in democracy requires collective efforts. It demands a renewed commitment to truth and integrity from both the media and the public. It requires us to hold ourselves accountable for the information that we consume and share. And it necessitates the reevaluation of the incentives driving our digital information ecosystem. As we navigate this challenge, let us also remember that the stakes are high, and the media can still really drive some of the key agendas into the forefront of public attention. I also want to quickly add that not every socio-political issues that we're facing today can be attributed to this and misinformation. In fact, recent study, also including my research as well, have found less and less evidence that of disinformation affecting people's behavior. Sometimes the problems stem from even deeper rooted factors. But at the end of the day, people's ability to make informed decisions as citizens, to hold our leaders accountable, and to participate meaningfully in democratic process hinges upon our access to reliable information. And you guys sitting here in the room can really make a difference. And thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Dr. Surachani. You mentioned the need for the more established media to strike back with fact-checking, with more truthful reportings. But given the influence of the social media these days, especially among younger people, so how effective do you think this kind of fighting back by the traditional media can be?
I think, just as one of the panelists from the previous session just mentioned, it's difficult, but we shouldn't give up, right? In terms of trying to leverage with the social media platform, it's an uphill battle for everyone involved. They're so opaque and they have pretty low liability in a lot of ways. So it's difficult, but I'm just hoping that I can be optimistic about it. And Dr. Fuadi would say that it's quite rare for me to try to be optimistic, but it's good to be hopeful, because it's an uphill battle for everybody, and we need to go on this fight together.
Yes. No, it could be one way for the established media to stay relevant. All right.
Definitely.
Okay. Next question, Fuadi, you may want to give us a regional perspective on this issue.
Okay, let me try. Oh, it doesn't work. Okay. Okay. As someone who is trained in academia and in theory, we like to explain things in pictures, group things, and trying to make sense of the social and political phenomena. So you have all heard, I think, working in this field, that the media is the fourth estate. But let me remind you that, wow, can't really see anything. The other three, the first three, the judiciary, the legislative, and the executive. Traditional media, the fourth estate, was formed the role of acting as check and balances against the first three. I think these are all, you are familiar with this, and this has been your role, and very important role in our democratic development. So the advantages of traditional media, right? You guys have editors, you guys have internal check and balances before something is put out. So that's really good. You guys have very clear ideology. Some may try to say that they are non-partisan, neutral, but we are humans, right? So we do influence, our personal opinion do influence our news reporting. Or even some, the good thing about traditional media is that even though it's like Fox News, it's like NBC, CNN, the ideological underpinning, the foundation is very clear. And that is what's good about the fourth estate, the traditional media. But the problem is, the media is usually a business, except Thai PBS, except PBS. It has owners, it needs to make money, it has its own opinion, which is not always beneficial to our society, our democratic development, to fix our social ills. So this is where the fifth estate come in, right? Think about the community, think about the citizen, the people, the civil society. They are now empowered by social media to have their own channel to speak out. So this is where the advantages of this is that it acts as a check and balance against the editors, against the fourth estate. So the fifth is checking against the fourth, right? But the problem is the fifth estate, the social media, the content driven by people, by the citizens, do not have editors, right? No one is checking it. So a lot of times you are engaged in misinformation, you are engaged in false information. So the relationship between the fourth and fifth are very, very important, right? Social media enables civil society, citizens to have their own media to speak out, but it doesn't have that check and balances. So this is where it comes in. The fifth has to check and balance against the fifth, while the fifth also check and balance against the fourth. Together, the 4.5, the fourth and fifth checks against the first three. I think this is how I make sense of how all these players within the 5 estates help build a healthy democracy. So I just leave it at that first.
Okay. So you're saying that it's not fair to blame the social media for being totally responsible for the decline in the people's faith in democracy, right?
No, I think because a lot of time they also help. They do call out politicians, they do call out the media, the far-right media, the totally left-wing media as well. So I think the emergence of social media is both pro and con. But they don't have any editors, they don't have accountability, so it falls upon people like Thai PBS, traditional media, to correct some of these misinformation. So there's a real role for the fourth estate.
Okay. All right, now we come to Australia, which is one of the countries that are seeing a decline in people's trust in the media. I understand that recently the government set up a commission to look into what it sees as negative impacts of social media platforms on people's faith in democracy. And I think that is one of the major issues now that the media are highlighting. So can you talk about that?
So in Australia, so yes, it's actually right. The Australian government has set up a joint committee to look at the impact of social media platform on democracy and the Australian society as a whole. I just going to kind of wanted to add it, the importance of public service media and of the ABC in particular, the national broadcaster of Australia for the Australian society. Although we've been talking about the decline in trust in general, very, very happy to report that we still actually have very high level of trust at the ABC. And there's, so we conduct research, independent research, to measure this audience level. And trust is actually one of our key KPIs as an organization. So we don't just look at audience reach in terms of the numbers, but it's a level of trust, and we hold ourselves accountable. Now, to put things in, to provide the background to this, is the ABC was established in 1932. So we have a long-standing legacy and an evolution that allowed us to reach that level of trust. But most importantly, we were set up by an act of a federal parliament, and our independence is mandated by law. So it's an advantage that we have, and very appreciate that not all countries or not all settings provide this kind of environment where the independence of your public broadcaster is mandated and is protected. And that certainly is one of the factors that would contribute to the level of trust that we have from the Australian public. I had prepared a statement, going with responsibility of the media, the challenges that we all face, but I think I'll be repetitive here because a lot of that is being said, especially you'll notice the reference to the Reuters Institute digital report as being a Bible. I think everyone is basically essentially just constantly referring to that, and it's so important to keep ourselves up to speed in terms of those trends. But one element I wanted to share is in terms of, so we have very specific values as a public media that we apply that I would imagine would be similar to what Thai PBS would be applying. So those are, we serve a public interest, we're independent, accountable, we represent the diversity of our population, and we also adapt to new technologies. So these are core values that we apply at the ABC. We also are very conscious of those challenges and of the risk of losing trust and the impact that social media has had on our performance, our ability to reach our audience. And we have a number of measures that we have put in place, and I'm happy to delve into that if I have a bit of time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've kind of listed a few of the key initiatives which I felt were quite successful and could be of interest to other delegates. So we are transparent in our ways of working, and that is really key to establish trust with the Australian public. When I speak about transparency, is transparency in our operations. Obviously, our funding is a matter of public knowledge, but we explain how we do the news. And that is very important, because if people don't know how the news is produced, they'll be skeptical about what they read and what they see. Our editorial standards and policy are available to the general public, and we train our staff, and we review our performance against those standards. But we also have a rigorous audience complaint handling mechanism where members of the public are invited to put out complaints and ask questions, and we take active steps in terms of addressing those. We have recently, actually this week, have launched an initiative, a fact-checking unit within ABC News that I think my colleague Matt, sitting over there, might be talking about in one of the next sessions. But it's a dedicated unit within our newsrooms that is set up to tackle misinformation and disinformation online. The very first story was about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. So I invite you to check out our website if you're interested. We also have taken steps in terms of getting closer to the communities that we serve. So it's very important as a public media to decentralize. We've all had a tendency to have, operator from our headquarters and engage with audience from those headquarters. In a country like Australia, but the same would apply to many other countries, you want to serve the entire population. You are meant to serve the entire population. And the best way to do this is to have journalists that are based close to the communities, who knows of the communities, knows of the stories that matter. So there's been investment in decentralizing our operations. There's a recent relocation to 300 staff being relocated to new studios outside Sydney, central Sydney. So just an example of an investment that is very valued. Okay. So we have a number of initiatives that we feel we have to continue investing in, and because maintaining trust. So even though we are mandated by law, and when it comes to independence, and we have a long legacy, and the Australian public trust us, we know that that is very fragile in the current context. So we constantly have to invest and reach the audience where it consumes context, takes those initiatives. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Nasrin. I mean, coming back to the issue of the inquiry commission, I think, is it something that members of the public in Australia agree with? Because critics see it as an attempt at censorship. And this should serve as a good, model for other countries which are having problems with what they see as negative impacts of the social media as well.
So to put things in context, that committee was established in May. The submissions are still, I think the closing date for the submissions was end of June. So there's, it's available, all the submissions are available are in the public domains. Very interestingly, the social platforms, so there was a submission by Meta, Facebook, and a submission by Google, and it is so interesting to read. One of the things that I have found, sad actually, is that we've been having all of this discussion and debate, and we do not have representatives from these platforms. Not that they've not been invited, as far as I know they have, they just don't engage. And when I read the submissions that they've put into the joint committee, to me, and I'm being recorded, but it is a denial of this impact and of the fact that they operate in a completely unregulated environment, do not take any editorial responsibilities for the content that is published on those platforms. So that joint committee, I'm hoping, will review those submissions. There was a submission from the ABC, submissions from members of the public. Everyone was invited. So there's a number of individuals were actually putting their position and also explain how they're being impacted by misinformation on social media, the impact that it has on mental health as well. So I see this as a very positive step that I'm glad our government has taken, because it's a very important discussions to have. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. And a lot has been mentioned about the role of public broadcasting. So last week I asked ChatGPT why the public media is still needed in this age of AI, right? And the answer is that yes, public media is still necessary, because at the end of the day, GPT needs trustworthy source of news to copy from. Okay, that even ChatGPT agrees with us that the role of the big media is very important, right? So, okay, Kun Kavi, please.
Well, thank you very much, Kun Thepchai. I'd like to welcome all of you to Thailand, because Thailand is the media lab, biggest in the world, where half truth, half trust, and no more democracy can create a government. So you are enter a very great gray areas. And you are looking at the biggest victim, the biggest casualty of traditional journalism. I look old, I'm very slow. I write my articles, my column, it takes 4 days. I don't ask ChatGPT, because ChatGPT would say that, oh my God, you're so slow, you have no future. I don't have any futures. Wrong. Just say that you have to connect to your audience. All my audience have died. Nobody read English anymore. I wrote in my column 102,050 words. And latest I checked, I have precisely 22 readers. Thank you very much. And this is what social media has done to me. Now, what is the problem? You talk about social media, you talk about how great it is. Lucky, Thai PBS had no problem, because Thai PBS can have all the time, all the image, everything. I still have to raise. You think 1 week is long? No, if you write in English, you write in Thai, you can bullshit. But you write in English, 3 words, oh my God, plagiarism, you are dead in the wood. In Bangkok, you will say that you're dead in the traffic anyway. So, what to do? The most important from what I'm listening is that fact-checking in the social media is still lacking. I think earlier, one panelist talking about UNESCO. I happen to be part of UNESCO for the past 17 years. UNESCO have suggested that all the social media unit, whatever you're doing, you must have a traditional, a journalist who do traditional way of checking sources. In Thailand, they said you have fact checking. Oh yes, I checked 3 sources. It happened to be the same sources, hot and spicy. The same source from the same one single wrong one. And that is the problem, because in Thailand, half truth, it's truth. Half trust, it's trust. That is why we create the world's most dynamic democracy. I'm sorry, Fuadi, our 5th pillar, have not done that job very well. So the problem with social media is fact-checking. If with fact-checking, as you know, you're tracking the audience. I don't know my audience anymore. You know why? I know only issue that is important for my country at the moment. So I write about it. I am the early warning system. I'm sorry, nobody read it. But, well, you have ChatGPT who can translate in Thai or into any other languages. So social media still lack the kind of credibility. And my goodness, AI is very useful. It's very useful when you don't want to do your homework. You order AI to do anything. But for me, I cannot do that, because One day, I tell you, I have told Mr. Tep Chai, a friend of mine, an intelligence officer, sent me an article titled, Write About ASEAN Like Mr. Kavi Chongkitchathawon. And he sent to me that article. And it's under my name. But I have not written it. It's very similar style as I have written. Oh my God, that's the end of me. So now I changed my style completely. Now I write, I'm like Tarantino, the director of Bill. Open scene, I chop the head. No more. Da, 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 blah, 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 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then the conclusion. When I start, the government doomed to die. That's it. No more, you know. Not saying that, oh, there's an election coming, and no more. So that changed my attitude toward the AI. So you have to put your emotional, you have to say what really you want, and also you write in English, make sure you put some Thai words to confuse algorithm of ChatGPT. And damn, the editor said that, Kavi, I know what it means in Thai. Don't have to put in Thai. I said I have to because otherwise GPT will not be confused. So I will say Thai word because I write in English. In the past, I have no problem in the past 39 years. Now, I'm done because of ChatGPT. I have to use ChatGPT now. Why? Because I said, you know, what did I say wrong? He said, you did not say something wrong. I have no information enough. Can you look at other things first? Now I have complexity. I have many other things to help me. So check facting. You need human because human like me have emotion and they get mad. Thank you.
That was great. That was great. But I think, Kun Kavi, you have been too pessimistic because I believe that long-form news pieces are not something that are automatically rejected by readers. I think judging from what we have been offering our audiences, I mean, through the various services of Thai PBS, long-form article, long-form pieces are quite well received if the contents, I mean, strike the right chord with our audiences. But coming back to the issue that Kun Kavi just raised about the role of the journalists in this modern media landscape, I think Kun Kavi is a good example of the old school journalist in the sense that he spent time, he invested resources in really understanding issues that he writes about. And this is exactly what we expect the mainstream media, the more established media at present to do. But the irony is that with most of the media outlets, especially those in Thailand, are bleeding financially. I mean, it would be too much of an expectation. I mean, to see them invest more in building resources like Kun Kavi again. So back to Dr. Surachani. So how do we deal with irony? Because as I mentioned earlier in my morning, the presentation, that many of the mainstream media outlets are dying out. And they are not investing as much as they used to do in areas of investigative reporting or serious reporting.
That's a really tough question. I wish I had the perfect answer to that. And that's kind of what I meant as well when I talk about like the disparity of resources, right? When it comes to the commitment or how different newsroom can uphold their journalistic standard and stuff like that too. It's really tough, especially in Thailand. I think from what I heard from my media friends as well, that this is what they have been grappling with. I really don't have the answer for this, really, but I guess what the traditional media can do, it's still kind of like the intersectionality of how they can make news that people really care about and would like to consume and then put it on the right platform versus, having truthful news reporting. And the reality is that truth is boring. It's really dry, and Thai people for some reason love this like soap opera sensationalized type of content, right? And that's kind of
Something that's
unfortunate.
trendy but cheaply done.
Yes, yes, and I think therefore it's not just the media or the journalists that have to be have to be held responsible, but I think it's the audience themselves as well, right? In terms of what type of information that they care about, and that's beyond of anyone's control. It's beyond the media journalist control. It like Kun Kawi just mentioned, he writes such a wonderful pieces, and only 20 people in Thailand read it, right? So I mean it comes down to more individualistic approach of how people consume information as well. Until people realize that truthful, important content is something that they should care more about, then there's really not much we can do.
Okay. But those 20 people who read Kun Kawi's articles are decision makers.
Yeah, there you go, Kun Kawi.
One of them is me.
And me.
No, the point here is very important because social media and all the famous podcasts, influencers, they know exactly what the audience wants. So they cater to your interest. My style is different. I write things I think is the concern, the public concern. It might not, the audience ABC is out there, might not listen, but in general, they like in Thailand, as you said, news has to be a form of entertainment. ฟังข่าวแล้วมัน is that exciting. It's much better than watching TV. Watching it must be watching YouTube is better than anything. That's what the audience want. That's the problem. And I have big problem. Help.
Okay. So Dr. Fuadi, coming back to the topic of this afternoon session, that truth, trust, and democracy. So you see any positive trend toward more people's faith in democracy with all the bad news about democracy, happening around the world these days?
I do. I think there is a lot to cheer for, and I help a certain political party here think about policy, and I do feel that there is a lot of hope, a lot of goodwill, that despite the challenges, despite things that are not so hopeful, I think the citizens have already been awoken, and I think it's very hard to put them back into a caste again. I think that has already been open, and the citizens are very active online, on social media. Yes, there are problems of unchecked facts, of misinformation. That is why the role of traditional media, particularly public broadcast media like Thai PBS, ABC, are still very, very crucial because you guys are less influenced by interests, by business interests, by other interest groups, because it's written by law that you have to survive. There's a certain budget. I think that is very important in this day and age. And I always say to my friends who want objectivity, who wants to follow Thai politics, to read and watch Thai PBS.
Okay, thank you. So let's read back to Australia. Besides ABC Australia, what about the rest of the mainstream medias? Do they see the roles in fighting back all this fake news and disinformation one of their priorities or not?
Well, actually, if you go back to that, those submissions I was talking about and that joint committee, you'd see that there's submissions from all the commercial media as well, all the independent media in Australia. So there's definitely concerns at that level. A key element with all of the discussions that we've been having, and I think that's where this committee will be looking at, is regulations. So one of the challenges that we're having with social platforms is that they've been allowed to grow completely unregulated. Traditional media, you can't just put anything out there without, there will be consequences. They are regulators. They are, legal avenues for people to take when something is being said on a broadcast platform. There is no consequences, there's no accountability. And I, like in Australia, our government attempted to actually set up the news bargaining code. I know the European Commission have, digital act looking at regulating those platforms. The challenge is that they operate at a global level. They've grown so powerful, and that's why we end up having this big conversation here, and no one from Meta, no one from YouTube, no one is coming and engaging. There's that pressure. So something has to happen at that level, and that is a discussion that is happening in Australia. Now, the challenge is we've seen what's happened in Canada, where regulation was put in place, and Meta just said, okay then, no more news on these platforms. It hasn't impacted Meta, but it has impacted the Canadian people who, like in the context of an election, have found, candidates, political candidates, just claiming whatever they want on Facebook, going completely unchallenged on these platforms, because that is still where people go and consume news. So that is definitely something that I think all collectively need to engage in and lobby and advocate for. For those platforms to operate in the same playing field that we are.
All right. Okay, thank you. We have just 1 minute left. So any last word from any one of you?
To follow up on my answer, we talk about the Reuters Institute report ranking. I was very surprised to see how high Thai PBS was ranked on that list, right? And I wonder, and you asked me about whether I have hope or not. I'm wondering if how much engagement a public broadcasting agency receive online on digital platform can be a good indicator of hope of a democratic health. I think we should look into this. And in other countries, I'm not sure if it's the same or not, but in Thailand, I'm very hopeful when I see Thai PBS ranking quite high on that list.
Oh, okay. No?
Well, I think Thailand has one biggest problem. The biggest problem is the quality of journalism, because it has not yet reached the level of the freedom they have enjoyed. So there is a big gap. I think it's very important for journalists or the future journalists in Thailand train themselves, educated themselves so they understand comprehensively fake news, good news, disinformation, malinformation, whatever, to be a good journalist, to compensate with and to complement the freedom that they have, that they enjoy every day in Thailand. That's what I like to say. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Khun Govi. So let's give our panelists a big hand. Okay. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Khun Thepchai. Could you stand up for the group photo as well before you leave the stage, please? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Khun Thepchai. As the editor of Thai PBS World, I must say that I'm very proud to have Khun Govi, who is one of our columnists for the website as well. And I can assure you that his articles gets more than 22 readers. Okay. So, as we all know, climate change is resulting in more extreme weather events and is impacting every aspect of news. As for many of us, it's going to change where we work, where our newsroom are located, and the training, and the equipment that we are going to be using. Your moderator for this discussion is Ahmed. Afra Rashid, Asiavision Senior Editor at the ABU. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. It's great to be back on the Global News Forum. For all those who are joining us today, welcome. And I've got the usual panel which I always get, which is the climate change panel. And it's my great pleasure to invite a great number of experts for this panel. First up, we've got Dr. Saida Tasmina Ahmed, who is the Director General of BTV Bangladesh. Dr. Tasmina acts as the News Editor-in-Chief at BTV. She joined the organization in 1994 and has been reporting and is from one of the most vulnerable climate countries in this region, which this year alone has battled devastating flooding, destructive cyclones, and extreme and fatal heat waves. Welcome, Dr. Tasmina. Up next is someone who needs no introduction to you, Mr. Indra Singh, who is the Director of News and Sports at FBC Fiji. Indra started his career in journalism 23 years ago and has worked in both print and online and traditional broadcasting. He just completed his 2 terms as chair of the ABU's News Committee yesterday and has been an instrumental player in the ABU's pool of climate and disaster reporters, which leads the ABU and Asiavision's COP and related conference coverages. Up next, we have Mr. Pipop Panich Bhakti. He's a renowned freelance journalist and documentary filmmaker who does social documentaries, including one that is very familiar with Thai audiences, the Mekong Travelers, that examine the impacts of development projects in the lower Mekong region. He is now dedicated to advancing science communication, citizen science, and ecological communication. So welcome all 3 panelists. Now, as you know, this year's forum is the future of news. And when we're talking about climate change also, I will try to steer this conversation into this direction, future of news. Just to give you an example, some figures. Of course, in the description of the panel, you see more disasters, more severe disasters, and more emergency coverage. At Asiavision, in the last 3 years, in 2022, Asiavision members contributed 6% of their stories on disaster and climate change coverage, which is around 917 individual news items. This increased by a percentage in 2023 last year. And this year so far, we have got 971 items of disaster and climate coverage, which is by half a year the same amount as 2 years ago. So you can see the importance of climate coverage to our Asiavision and the larger ABU family as well. So let me just start with you, Dr. Tasmina. As I mentioned, Bangladesh this year has faced severe flooding. It has faced extreme heat waves, and it has seen destructive cyclones. How do you mobilize your journalists? How do you organize your operations when reporting?
Thank you, Afra Rashid, for inviting me. Before moving on to your question, I just want to draw your attention to some points, meaning some uniqueness of disaster management in Bangladesh. As we all know that Bangladesh is a role model in disaster management capacity. Being a developing country, Bangladesh is, I should say, it has built a very disaster resilient nation. Whatever we have, we can survive. We have that courage to fight back, right? So we can stand up. from the very beginning also we can stand up. Okay, and we have the very improved kind of early warning system nowadays we have. Last time in 1970, there was a very disastrous cyclone called Gorky, where we have that the casualty, the death toll was 7-digit. Now we have brought down it to single-digit one. Still we have that kind of calamities, but we can bring it to single-digit thanks to our early warning system. And another one, very unique features is voluntarism. In our country, people, the common people, they join the government agencies, government relief activities and rehabilitation activities to, to help other people. Say, for example, we have as many as 78,000 CPP volunteers. Of them, 50% are women. So any disaster, be it natural, be it man-made. Last time in Rana Plaza disasters, the common people, they joined hand with the government to rescue the victims. So this is, I should say, this is a unique features of our nation that we are, we want to help people. Okay. Above all, our government has given our Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief the extreme power, meaning when there is a disaster, the ministry, they have the extreme power to use any infrastructure, any resource for the rescue operation and for reallocation and rehabilitation as well. Any government structures, any schools, any colleges, any university will be turned into cyclone shelters. You understand it or not? Okay. So this is our, how we fight back the natural calamities. And above all, we have formulated SOD, Standing Order of Disaster. Okay. This is some sort of Bible where we have the, nothing is left where it doesn't spell out. Nothing is left. Every pros and cons has been spelled out in this Standing Order on Disasters, SOD. So we follow the SOD, we will be coming successful, okay? And to say, this is not the meaning, the final one is we are proactive, not reactive in managing disasters. So we plan beforehand, we have regular meetings so that we know what are our loopholes, what need to be improved. So we are proactive and it is a continuous process. So that's the unique features we have. So when there is a disaster, say for example, we have those weather bulletins that there is a cyclone imminent. So what we do, we need to focus on our coastal areas where we want to see how is the situation there, what are the preparedness, what are the people's awareness. We will be showing people that our CPP, our volunteers, they are working round the clock to people make aware about the imminent disasters and ask them to go to the shelters, cyclone shelters. Nowadays, our cyclone shelters have, they can accommodate people as well as their cattle also, cattle also, because in the rural areas, they don't want to leave their cattle. So so they say, no, we will be staying back. So we have that facility in our shelters as well. So, what the local administration is doing for the rehabilitation, reallocation of their of the affected people, and above all the relief operations, relief and preparedness operations we'll be showing. So we have 64 stringers across the country. BTV got stringers in every district. We have one stringers. So we'll be asking them to show the situation there. What are the preparations is going on? How is the awareness program and the situation in the shelter, cyclone shelters, the relief operation when there is the the landfall of the cyclone or anything. So what is the relief operation? What kind of lackings we have? So this we have. What I want to say that we sort of work in a concerted way, very integrated way. We fight back the natural calamities. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sasmina. Yeah, I'm glad you ended up with the cyclone example because my next question is to Indra, who comes from a really cyclone-prone area. With the increasing climate-related disasters we've had this year, and also the rise in technology, the rise in AI technology, how has your newsrooms adapted in terms of reallocating your budgets or resources to address climate change?
Thank you, Afru, and pleasure, and to our fellow panelists, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I think you have asked about budget. There's no budget for newsrooms like us, specifically for investing in technology or sorts of things like AI, etc., which would help other bigger newsrooms, perhaps. Now, we get together and we do it the traditional way. However, it is about convincing your superiors and those in charge higher above than you. But they also have other priority areas to look at, whereby they have to see if they're going to push that amount of X dollars into buying a new software, or will it be pushed towards buying a new camera, particularly for a smaller newsroom. Having said that, we are slowly starting to see that the mindset is changing, whereby people are starting to understand that without coming on board or getting on board with the advancing technology that's being made available all around the world for newsrooms, you will be left way behind. Gone are the days of your traditional people in the islands who could give you a cyclone update 2 hours later that it's passed. Now people want it ASAP. It's approaching, this is what we've done, this is where we are. At this juncture, I'd just like to say that women as first responders have played a very big role in ensuring that how we've dealt with coverage in terms of what they've done in taking care of their families, in being out there in the environment, in the communities rather, and being in the newsroom at the same time, providing coverage. So I think that is something that I wanted to add. But back to technology, we are getting there, but you'll still face obstacles. And I have no qualms in saying it. Perhaps for smaller countries, particularly SIDS, you are about 10 years off where you fully get up to a stage of even being on stage one of what the bigger broadcasters are on at the moment, primarily because there's no money. If the bigger broadcasters are, trying to get revenue, which is very hard to come by, imagine what's happening to smaller broadcasters and media organizations, which are fighting for the same dollar amongst, 4 or 5 media companies in smaller countries.
I think you've raised some great questions about both of you have mentioned resource allocations for smaller, not smaller newsrooms, but vulnerable newsrooms, I would say. I will get back to that point in the next part of discussions, but before that, earlier in the discussions on the panels that you had today, we've talked about truth, how integral truth is, especially in this changing media landscape. And Mr. Pippo, I would like to ask you about the role of newsrooms, especially when reporting climate change, what the crucial role of what newsrooms can do to maintain this trust, in maintaining this trust with that traditional media organizations have built so far.
Well, thank you very much, and nice meeting all of you today. I think the future of newsroom, as far as climate change is concerned, has to involve a lot of inclusivity. Before this, I'm from the generation a little bit after Kunkavi, but then I'm from the days when broadcasting business was really big, and we are, the people who go and do the news gathering. But in today's landscape, we have to acknowledge everybody, and we have to find a way to use our technology to include as many people as possible. I have heard wonderful news about the volunteers. And I think that is something that I used to work at Thai PBS, by the way, as a deputy director general. And during my administration, and even today, we encourage the so-called citizen journalism, which for many of you, you might feel that it's a little bit questionable but for the climate story or environmental story, leave alone the political story for a while, it's really useful because they are there and they know exactly what happened. And many times they know much, much better than the newsroom or the editors who, resided really centralized in Bangkok. So we have to find a way to include them, and one way of doing it is let their mobile devices become an instrument of news reporting. And of course, in today's world, we move further into the so-called citizen journalism. No, citizens scientists. That means they can also gather information for us, like precipitation, the amount of rainfalls, the amount of water in the creeks or river. All this information is really useful for the people who do the planning. So I think that is very important. And in order to do that, news organizations have to develop a new way of being connected to the people. They are no longer our consumers or our the people who are just waiting to be at the end of the line, but they are like collaborators. They're the people that work with us, and they have to have that trust. And we have to have that trust. Many times, there's a big question mark coming up when I talk about citizens' involvement. And it's true even in a really democratic country, because people feel that people are very biased, and we professional journalists are being trained to at least be really aware of our own biases. But I think in today's age, with the new kind of technology, and we will talk about AI later, it can be really useful, because the reason AI has to step in, because when you ask so many people to do the data collection, then you have this big data, and there's no one person who's going to be able to respond to that, as you say, ASAP. So you need a machine. But as someone who follow your direction, not someone who make decision. I would have to say that I really like this quote. I'm going to end to be brief, that actually we should use AI to clean our ditches, not writing us poems. Have you heard that? So I think humanistic value, our empathy, our commitment to the wellness of fellow human beings and other entities is really important amidst the usefulness of AI.
And I think you've mentioned a very important aspect of using not just AI, but the vast pool of resources for less resourced newsrooms, which is citizen I would not call them citizen journalists, but citizen information sources, I would say. So I'll come back to that point later, but going back to the resources, and how to allocate these things. You've mentioned that the budget constraints when it comes to relaying important climate information, and I'm sure as public broadcasters you are facing this challenge, but private broadcasters will not face this challenge. They are much more well-resourced, much more budget. They have more budget. How do you address this? How do you overcome this challenge when relaying accurate, relaying accurate information to your audiences?
Actually, there is social media, social platforms, everything, but still television has a very important role. When there is a disaster, people will be switching on the television, right, to see, to know what's going on. So, Bangladesh is a small country, but we have as many as 40 commercial televisions, cable televisions we have. So we are the only one, the public service broadcasters, okay? So while addressing any disaster situation, Bangladesh television, meaning we face, we are in some sort of dilemma. We are in a fix what to do, because let me elaborate. The commercial television, what they do, they anything they want to do, they want to make it more sensitized. You see, they want to exaggerate the figures. They want to, they highlight the negative things. Lastly, in COVID-19 situation, our country, our government have, they have given financial assistance to 1 crore people. Okay, so this is a big amount, the government have spent. So there was one television news is that, there is one family who has been who have been starving for weeks. They don't have any food, and very, very juicy, very some sort of very negative story. So what we went there, we investigate this case, and we found out that the story is fabricated. The family, they are very well off, but somehow they says that people didn't reach us. Somehow they make this story, meaning the public service broadcasters, we want to resort to the fact-finding situation. Anything we want to, we'll be putting on air, we have to we have to check back, right? We have to check back because we have that kind of responsibility. And for the private television channels, they don't have, because anything goes wrong, they will say, oh, sorry. But for us, we cannot do that. It is very crucial, and always we will be facing the people that the public service broadcasters are very lazy people. You cannot give quick statistics. You cannot give information quickly because we need to check back. Whenever there is the polling in any election, the results, we have to check back with the election commission. So without their endorsement, we cannot publish that election result. Okay.
And I think you give, not to cut you short, but because we are running out of time. But the importance that dilemma which public broadcasters face is the trust that audiences put in public service broadcasters, and especially public service broadcasters who also serve the function of state broadcasters. Yes. Audiences often choose between verifying their own own conclusions, whether the public service broadcaster is giving the accurate information or whether they are a mouthpiece for the government.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that public service broadcasters and state broadcasters will face. Coming to you, Indra, along the same lines, misinformation and disinformation, especially on online platforms, or whether it's competing private broadcasters. When you are relaying this information, disaster information to your audiences, now in Fiji you have a huge gap between your rural and urban populations. So what is your strategy in addressing misinformation, addressing fake news when you relay this information to these two different demographics?
Yeah, thank you. I think it goes back to what Piope said earlier on. It's about having your trusted sources out there. So they're not really citizens, journalists, but they are people you know. It could be your family member. It could be someone that you grew up with. Somebody you trust, who you can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, are you 5 hours out of Suva? What's the weather like there? What's happening there? Could you give me an update, etc.? Just coming back to what you asked before this, Afro, I think it's a very important topic. How do small newsrooms or growing newsrooms, cope with the technology? I think the answer is right here, collaborations. I think collaborations takes you a long way. And for us, for climate change in particular, FBC has collaborated with the ABC out of Australia, whereby because of them, we were able to get onto their platform of the weekly climate change show that they have. So if you collaborate, that is one way of, bypassing the budgetary constraints to get that done. But back to, trying to get verified information, which is very important. Some years ago, I think it was 12, 13 years ago, our Met Office got a flooding information totally wrong. They had said that it was going to, pour at this time and the flooding would happen. 4 hours before that, an entire town was underwater with people not being able to leave their homes, and there was a big backlash. I think people have become smarter, and in the modern day, yes, technology is developing and evolving, and out of the 800,000 population, we've got 600,000 smartphone users. So they are out there, they know what is happening, they are able to help us and collaborate and, get of course, verification and, fact-checking is very important to get that information out.
And just along that line, dear Mr. Pipo, we've talked about how to present this information that we get, the vast source of information that we get. How do you think you can leverage AI in presenting this in a very economically feasible or ways that, the less resourced newsrooms can leverage the technology that we are coming up with?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the technological question, but I just want to follow up a little bit on collaboration, if I may. The key to climate change reporting is not only informing, but we want them to be able to have some kind of actions. People have to know what to do when things strike, not after. I think gone through the day when disasters strike and the media is just going and looking for interesting tear-jerking story. Those days are gone because of the social medias are taking over. So our job is actually before the disaster strike. What can we inform them so they know what to do? Even in a very small way, say the seasonal shift. Like, in Thailand at one time, we used to have a longer cold weather, and that's really nice for tourism industry. But now it's only 1 day left. And how can they adapt to that? That's, I think, it's climate change reporting as well. You don't have to wait for the big landslide or the rising. Those are really serious and really important. But I think there are these stories as well that you need to look at your readers and your listener as collaborators. Once they read it and learn it, and they know what to do next. And many times I've learned that they are the one who have the solutions. So solution can come back to us, and we can go creating this continuous flow of information coming in, data collection from the field, information come in, go through our editorial, make it interesting, as you say. And one thing that generative AI can do, which I think it's not that good yet, it can visualize certain circumstance, so it can be communicated to the mass. Like, hey, this is what can happen if we, if things gonna go toward the direction that it's going. The flood can be worsened in so and so area. I think generative AI is capable of doing that. Less, they have to have accurate input. So without good grounded data, you notice one thing, all the AI's generative pictures, they look weird. They look so centralized, and they don't look that real. Even the good one, with the ChatGPT, 4.0, it has still problematic. So I think we can use it, maybe 5 years or 3 years from now. Now the time's getting really short. 10 years is I'm probably gone myself. But nonetheless, I think the key to your answer is that, yeah, you can try, and you should, especially doing data evaluation and generating visual or information or maybe some graphs with good data. But without good input, AI is only, it can be really deceiving. And that's one thing that I think that all of us are aware of that. But nonetheless, we jump on the bandwagons for one reason, that it's quick, easy, fast, and can be profitable. So, well, I don't know. That's the kind of things that everybody have to make the decision.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all three panelists. We have just 60 seconds left on our clock with our allocated time. So I would like to invite Ms. Nargiza Numanova, who is the head of the ABU's SG's office, to introduce one of the key undertakings that ABU conducts in terms of climate change and disaster risk reduction, which is the ABU Media Savings Lives Initiative. So without further ado,
hello, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, distinguished panelists, for your insightful sessions. And it's true that ABU always has been the early leader in making sure that journalists in Asia Pacific are fully briefed about how to communicate on disaster and climate issues. And BTVA, FBC, Thai PBS, and many other members, they've always been very active on these matters. So now ABU, together in cooperation with UNESCO, we are doing this project and developing the model for disaster preparedness and response plan for media institutions. So we want to make sure that all the media institutions in the region, not in the region but worldwide, they have this plan on disaster prevention and preparedness. So what we would like to ask you to go through this survey, so you can see the QR code here. So this survey will help us to collect the knowledge whether media institutions, they have this plan in their organizations, and help, if they don't, it will help them to develop their own plan or enhance this plan. So we will ask you to please take 15 minutes, it will take 15 minutes of your time to go through this survey, and it will help us a lot to further develop this tool. So I would say that 15 minutes of your time will help to save lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nargiza. And thank you to our panelists. We will leave the QR code on this screen while you enjoy your the coffee break, the afternoon break, so that you can fill out, have a very productive coffee break, if I may. Thank you so much.
Okay, please remain on stage for the group photo. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Afra, and distinguished panelists. And please, if you're not familiar with ABU's Asiavision News Exchange, and you want to see their new APV platform, please reach out to Afra and the team. And now we're going to leave you 15 minutes to do the survey with the QR code. And then we're going to have a break after this and then come back in 15 minutes. Correct.
Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back again to the live session during the panel break in the afternoon. You're now with me, Kitipachin Sukjit, the content creator and news reporter of Thai PBS World. So we just finished the panel 4 called Thai PBS Forum, Truth, Trust and Democracy. So we are waiting for the panel 6 in the late afternoon. I'm now with Kun Kavi Chongkit Thawan, the veteran journalist and expert in ASEAN and international relations. Sawadee krap.
Sawadee krap.
So I'm going to talk with him and discuss with him about the challenge to be the truth, trust and democracy media, the reporter in Thailand in the nowadays world.
Well, we live in the world of social media.
Yeah.
So it's very important as a journalist like me, who is a printed journalist.
Yep.
I write my own column, so it takes a lot of time to fact check, to make sure everything I write, is backed up by the real information.
Yeah.
So it's very important because a lot of time with social media, people tend to came out with article.
Yeah.
They like to present information that is not really fact-checked.
Yeah.
I have to do it several times in a very traditional way,
Yeah.
very slow. As I said, I am an old school journalist, and I also wrote in English. So it's very important because when I write in English, it's widely read around the world. So a lot of people can check what I have written, whether it's correct or not.
Yeah, I think being truth and trust media is easy to understand, but the democracy media. So can you define this word, the democracy media?
Well, in Thailand, the situation is the reverse.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about democracy without talking about truth and trust.
Yeah.
Normally, in a democratic society, there must be a high level of truth.
Yeah.
That is media that is free, professional to present truth and fact as it is.
Yep.
And then the truth will create trust in the institution and among the public. That will be the foundation for democratic development. But in Thailand, that is not the case. We talk a lot about democracy, democratic development without referring to truth and trust.
So that's the definition of to be the democracy journalist. So as you've said that you are the old school style, so what's your perspective? What's your idea about using generative AI in the newsroom?
I think you are a human being.
Yeah.
You write with some value judgment, with some cultural thinking. You live in Thai society, you know what's going on in Thailand, in the neighborhood, in the other provinces. You write with that conscience. You don't rely on the AI, which has no moral judgment, no emotion. I am a journalist. Sometimes I'm angry. I have emotion. So I'm human after all.
Yeah, we are human.
So I think it's very important to keep that in mind.
And how about fact checking? You said you have been doing a lot of fact checking. So what tool, if you don't use AI, which tool you using?
Or you talk to the sources that you know as much as you can, human beings, and you make sure that it's diversified. A lot of people talk to the first person, second person, third person. They come from the same wrong sources. So it's very important that you check the correct one.
So what is the challenge of the old school journalists today?
To make sure that you play important role in the social media so that you help them.
So what we should do to keep the old school still in the world, the old school journalists in the world.
Make sure you hire them in your editorial board in the social media.
That's the point. That's the point.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, ครับ คุณกวีครับ
Thank you.
It was a very beneficial interview.
Thank you.
Okay. So คุณกวี is a very well-known journalist who working on the international relations, the investigative news, and he also write the articles on the Thai PBS World website. You can go to the website and find his article. Very, very investigative and informative. All right. So next, I'd like to invite Kun Thep Chayong, the executive advisor of Thai PBS. ได้ครับ
ขามันล็อก
Okay, so I'm walking him,
ต้องถือไมโครโฟนด้วยโทษขามันล็อก
sending him here. Thank you so much, ครับ คุณกวีครับ So I'm now with Kun Thep Chayong, the executive advisor of Thai PBS. So I can say that you are the one who set up the foundation of the public media of Thailand. You've been through a lot, more than 10 years. So what's the main changes of the public media in Thailand, as you can see?
First of all, I was just a small part of the group of people who were instrumental in having Thai PBS set up 18, 19 years back.
Yep.
But I think the biggest change that I have seen in the Thai media landscape is the fact that people have more interest in news. Right? Okay, it doesn't matter what platforms that they use to access news. Of course, we have to accept the fact that the social media platforms now have become very dominant. And Thai PBS has always been part of that development. So I think the biggest change is the way that the mainstream media, perform their duty as the messengers. I think they see the threat. I would say initially it was seen as a threat from social media, but now I think the mainstream media has incorporated the social media as part of their main platform now. So in that sense, I mean the mainstream media are now heavily involved in social media. So that shouldn't be as that they once saw as a threat. It's no longer that anymore. So I think that's the biggest change. I think mainstream media are now quite prevalent in the social media landscape now. But as we have been talking about this issue today at this forum, I think the main issue is how the mainstream media, the traditional media, the broadcaster, can stay relevant in the face of this new media landscape, especially with the advent of artificial intelligence that has become a very prominent feature in most newsroom now. Because artificial intelligence, again, initially was seen as a threat as well, just like the arrival of the social media, right? But up to now, I think most media corporations have to admit that AI is now part of their life now. So it's no longer seen as a threat, but being seen as an assistant, being partner in the newsroom.
So what is the most challenge of the mainstream media nowadays in the generation that everyone can be a news reporter with only mobile phone?
I think if you look back, one of the most important factors that enable the mainstream media to be relevant is the role it plays in being messenger of news, of information, and also the role as the watchdog, holding people in power accountable, exposing corruption and abuse of power. So that's exactly the role that the mainstream media need to continue to play. Otherwise, it would be overshadowed by the dominance of the social media. And of course, in this new media landscape, the role of the mainstream media has to be expanded. To counter disinformation, fake news as well, and do fact checking in order for the public and to be able to rely on mainstream media for accurate and reliable information.
That's the duty and the challenge of the mainstream media. But talking about the public media, which is also one of the mainstream media. The mainstream media, we have the state-owned, we have private, we have public media. So what is the importance of the public media in the world nowadays? Why we should have public media?
I think it's very clear that the public media, which is media that is publicly funded, meaning that it doesn't have to depend on advertising revenue, but it depends on people's so-called taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
So it's safe from having to be dependent on business interests.
Yep.
And it also shields the public media from interference from politicians, our government. So that is a big difference between public media and commercial media. Being independent, being free in reporting, in conveying message to the people, in providing new and non-news content to the public.
Yep. So come to the last question. So I would like to use one of the panel topic to ask you, the future of news. What's next? Very wide.
First of all, there is future in what we're doing as journalists, because at the end of the day, people need to have reliable sources of information, reliable sources of news, and people should come to realize that public media, especially public broadcasting service like Thai PBS, are in the best position to provide truthful news and to provide contents that help people make informed decisions, which is very important in any democracy.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Khun Thepachai. Very beneficial information.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, okay. So next, I'd like to invite Khun Deborah Steele, the Director of News of ABU. So, but meanwhile, I'll tell you what next. So we have been through 5 panels already. So next panel, the panel 6, we will have the battle of relevance, listening to and learning from audiences. This is very important. And panel 7, the future of news, what's next? Okay, before we go into the panel 7, we have the answer from Khun Thepachai already. But in the panel, we will have Khun Chang Shili, the Director of CGT and Digital, Mr. Asel Musakaliyeva Tang, the founder of EduTech Future, a Microsoft in Education global training partner, Bei Fan, the President of Radio Free Asia, Joe Hironaka, Chief of Unit, Communication and Information UNESCO Bangkok, and this panel will be moderated by Khun Claire Pashimanon, the editor of Thai PBS World. But also, between the panel 6 and panel 7, we also have a showcase called Investigative Journalism by CNAs in the topic of Walk the Line, presented by the producer of Walk the Line, Jonathan Chia. Okay, and right now the booth still open here for every attendance to join us. As you can see there, as you can see at that corner, in the break time, many attendants, many participants come here to join the booth already. All right, and Deborah is here. All right, so right now I am with Khun Deborah Steele, the news director of the ABU, the Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union. Yeah. Okay, I would like to talk firstly about today's event, today's topic, the future of news. So how the future of news is so important that this topic becomes topic of the seminar today.
Because it's a huge issue and it covers so many different aspects. And I think the industry's always been subject to change, right? We've all gone through lots of transformation over the years, but now it's faster than ever. And it's happening on so many fronts. We all know there are news organizations that are closing down, that are making people redundant. We know that there are enormous changes in technology. But there are also issues in the relationship with social media companies, in issues like climate change, where some organizations have to move their newsroom or they have to retrain their staff, or they have to be mindful of this surge in stories that will result from extreme weather events. So some really important issues, and our aim is to get all of our members thinking about the issue and thinking about how it impacts their training and their investment.
Yeah, it seems like ABU have event like this every year. So last year also held in Malaysia, right?
Yes, it was, in Kuching, in Sarawak, yes.
Yeah, and each year topic changed.
Yes.
Yeah, so maybe the audience might want to know who is ABU and what is ABU working?
The Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union is a professional association of about 230 members from right across Asia and the Pacific. So going from Samoa in the South Pacific all the way across to Turkey. So it's an enormous geographical spread. It is an enormous number of people who those organisations serve. You know, it's half of the world's population is served by our members. And our aim is to help with capacity building, training, development, but also industry information sharing and networking. And so our members help other members. Our members have incredible expertise. They include some of the biggest and best media organisations in the world, as well as some small island states that need some help.
Yeah.
So it's a very diverse group.
Yeah. So can you tell a bit about the next year plans, the next year event?
Oh, I can't talk about next year yet.
You have to wait and
That's
see.
under wraps. That's under wraps.
Under wraps. All right. So thank you, Deborah, for today's interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So, all right, I'm going to send you back into the panel room for the panel 6 called in the topic of the battle for relevance, listening to and learning from audiences, and going to panel 7 on the topic of the futures of news. What's next? Thank you for staying with us until now, and I hope everyone still stay with us until the end of the day. And back to the panel room. Sawasdee krap.
Welcome back from the coffee break, ladies and gentlemen. We're lucky this afternoon to have 2 showcases to inspire you and to highlight the importance of investigative journalism. The first showcase is TRT's Emmy-winning program, Ukraine Wartime Diaries. It's a part of the Off the Grid documentary series, and it's presented by Off the Grid co-founder and executive producer Mohsin Enayemi. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. There are a lot of things that have been said earlier today. It's been very interesting, very heavy discussions. So I'll try to keep the same level and make sure it's going to be interesting and inspiring and probably kind of like useful. This is the plan, short biography, who I am. We're going to mention Off the Grid, our program at TRT World. Some insight from awards winning with a focus on the Emmy that we won in last September 2023. And some thoughts about investigative documentary in today's world. Why we should do it and how we should do it, and what's the benefit not only for the audience, but also for the channel, but also for the society, and making sure that this investigative journalism is not like, falling somewhere in a crack. But before that, I would like to explain who am I. So my name is Moussine Naimi. I am a French citizen. I work for TRT World as an executive producer and co-founder of the Grid series. I come from radio, print, photography, and then TV. So I experience any kind of media. I have a strong appetite for social media too, because I think it's also the future, and it's been debated at many occasions today. It's also very interesting to also discuss about AI and how it goes in our industry. So I lived in many countries. I used to be correspondent. I was correspondent in Sri Lanka. I was correspondent in India. I was correspondent in Jerusalem. And after that, I started making documentaries. So I went to Qatar, and then from Qatar, I moved to Istanbul, Turkey, where we have this series of the Grid, which is really long format, investigative, but also human. That's very important. We really try to make sure that it has a human face. While from news to documentary, it's just simple. After doing news for a long time, I felt the need that I should shift to something longer. When you tell in-depth story in a news package, sometimes you have the frustration of not being able to say more than the story deserves, than the character deserves. And that's very important that I mention the character, because character is critical when you do a documentary, especially investigative. Information is really important, but also the character, but we will speak about this later. Before that, I want to show you this 90 seconds of the Grid investigative series broadcasted at TRT World. This is one of our flagship show. So please enjoy 90 seconds of the Grid promo.
When life takes an unexpected turn. Off the Grid, our Emmy-winning documentary series gives them a voice. Incisive.
От тоді ми зрозуміли, що це все серйозно, що росіяни прийшли нас вбивати.
Investigative.
بدك أسلحة فرودة كلاشينات اللي بدك إياه كل شيء موجود.
مرة صعدت ضغط، كنت أنا وسيلة الضغط على زوجي بالاعتداء عليه قدامي.
Inspiring.
Io kusema watu ndio wanachimba na mkono. Sasa kila siku wanabomoa.
We expose injustice and capture the struggle of people battered by the unpredictable world.
Ne znam kako će se ovo sve završiti.
Off the Grid. Personal journeys, global stories.
So this show was created 5 years ago. The idea behind it was to tell in-depth stories, to reveal information, and also to make sure it's not too dry, because the goal is for the audience not only to learn, but also to remember what's going on. So we talked a lot about how the audience is perceiving. I think the audience is pretty smart. If you give them good quality, they would appreciate it. I think the audience is really keen on learning. As a public state, we don't have only the mission to entertain people, we also have to educate, we also have to make sure the information is public knowledge. That's a very important thing. So saying that, it's really critical that after every episode that we do, we make sure that audience understands, receive the message, and get all the nuances that's needed. Because obviously, you can't explain everything in black and white. And when you go black and white, usually you end up like, in the wrong side of the truth. So the show is content. The show is like content oriented. It has to be balanced, obviously, accurate and interesting. But most importantly, what we have in Off the Grid is we think that people will forget what they learn, but they will never forget what they feel. So by having strong characters, by making sure the audience identify to them, without going too emotional, because that's too easy and that's too cheesy. So you want to be accurate, but also human. And that's why we have this show, which explain from the human perspective when they reach a turning point in their life. And that's why the slogan is personal journeys, but we touch, obviously, global stories, because we're an international channel. We have to reach a mass audience, English-speaking audience. But the idea is to make sure that the global, the story is speaking to everyone. One other aspect also, which is important for investigative journalism, is I think sometimes we tend to forget the aesthetics. Of course, content is king, and of course, a mobile phone video with a strong content will always perform very well. But I think we can also make an effort as a filmmaker, executive producer, director, to focus also on the aesthetics. And that's quite important because obviously TV is a visual art. And by visual arts, you can't neglect the beauty of a shot. You can't neglect the importance of light. You can't neglect the beauty of sound. And I'm not talking about technical here. I'm talking about how it looks good and how at the end it does not disturb you and even actually attracts you and sometimes inspire you. So the human factor is quite important, and that's why, for example, we don't make a strap of the characters, because after every episode, you're supposed to remember Irina, you're supposed to remember Abu Ahmed, you're supposed to remember anyone because you heard their story and they developed it in a very strong and emotional manner that at the end you can't forget them. And that's why I was saying people really forget what they learn, but they never forget what they have felt. So this is a short selection of what we did. There's much more, of course. So this is the one that won the Emmy, the Ukraine Wartime Diaries. It's the pitch was people investigating and people documenting war crimes while the war is still going on. It happens by the past, but to be honest, it's very rare. Usually we wait until the war is finished, and then after we start investigating. But for this, one of the first time in Ukraine, we did that. I want to focus also on this one. Silent Death is the first one that I did. It's about organ trafficking during the migrant crisis. So basically, people were so broke that they resort to sell their organs so they can get some money and then move their family to a different country, mostly Europe or sometimes the US, America. And it was very emotional because obviously nothing goes as planned. Some of them get cheated, some of them get shot. But it was very interesting because I had to interview the mafia ringleader, who is the one collecting the organs and taking care of the patients. So that was very, very difficult, and I will probably mention it again because there is a lot of things about the thing to do and not to do. As you can see also, we don't have a specific region. This is about Syria, this is about Croatia, this is about Bosnia, Malaysia, Lebanon, Tunisia, Italy, This is Kenya fighting for water, which is something we did like on the climate crisis, because we mentioned this earlier. Climate crisis is a big issue, and it's going to come like more and more obvious. And fighting for water is exactly what's happening in Kenya and other countries. So we had few awards. We'll be very proud of getting a lot of awards from London, Italy, US, Brazil, Oslo. And of course, I want to focus on the Emmy. Emmy is the most prestigious award. It's very, very hard. You have a huge competition. Some of them call it the Nobel Prize of TV. I'm not a big fan of this comparison because I don't feel myself like, as important as a Nobel Prize. But yeah, the competition is really, really tough. You have like thousands of applications. It's all over the world. And obviously, when you being nominated, it's really an honor. And that's why they give you a medal, because they consider that the 4 people who have been nominated deserve to win. Then there's one winner. The organ trafficking piece was nominated in 2018, but the Ukraine one has been the winner in the last session in 2023. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's very exciting, it's fascinating. You get the recognition, you get the exposure. It also boosts your credibility. But what's very interesting also, it encourages you to do bigger, longer, higher, and that's what we're doing at TRT World. We are going bigger on this show, making sure it's gonna keep doing better and better episodes, and we have all the appetite, and the team is behind it to make sure that we keep the high standards of quality. And also, it gives you the responsibility. When you get an Emmy, you can't say you get a lot of exposure, so you have to be cautious of what you're saying, and what you're producing, and what you're putting on air, because you can always be like seen as someone carrying the heritage of an Emmy. But that's quite fascinating experience, to be honest. They don't tell you anything. A lot of people ask me the question. They don't tell you anything. Even at the last minute, they don't tell you anything. I was literally surprised. Then they call you on stage, and you have to make a speech of 35 seconds. But they want to keep it like, surprise. They want to keep the surprise, and they want to make sure that nothing is like said well too prepared. And the last thing is investigative journalist. So I put a few shots of me here on the field. So this one was about the organ trafficking. Why I put this photo here? Because this guy, he's a nurse, and he was the direct witness of organ removal in Beirut on Syrian people. But this guy, when he wanted to speak, it took me a long time to convince him. I have to say, it took me more time to convince him than the mafia ringleader, who didn't want to speak at the beginning, but just for ego, at the end, he starts to speak, because he said, I'm not a fan of anyone, I'm a mafia leader, so that's why he starts speaking. But the nurse, we changed everything about him. His voice, it's in silhouette. And what's really, really interesting here is usually when you do investigative journalism, of course, you have to get your fact right. You have to reveal something. You have to make sure it's very, very, very strong. But at the same time, you have to protect your source. So one thing that I do usually, I don't film their face, because some of people, they film the character, and they say, it's okay, I'm going to blur you in post-production. I'm going to crop it after on the timeline. What's happening if someone gets your camera in between? If, for example, in Israel, they take all your hard disk and they take all your footage. So there's no post-production. They get original footage. So you make sure that you don't film them, and that's the best guarantee, because you can't reveal something that you don't know. You can't tell them, they can't see who's behind, because there's nothing actually they can catch on you. And this is in Ukraine, and this is in Gaza. Why I put these two pictures here? Because I think it's very interesting to see how the investigation is conducted. and sometimes it can be a little bit like, oriented. So we have two different war here, and as you can see, the treatment is not the same at all. So there's many things to say about hostile environment. There's many things to say about investigative journalism. But what's really important for me is I think investigative journalism, and that's my personal opinion, I think is the future of news. I think is the future of is the future. It's already been the case, but I don't see investigative disappearing anytime soon. People will be always interested to learn something, and without putting them into a state of anxiety, we can't just give them the knowledge so they can think by themselves, because again, the audience is less stupid than we think. And of course, you keep all the generic thing that we know, the commitment to ethics, the research, the accuracy, and you make sure that it's going to last, because a documentary at the end of the day is something that stays. It's a document. It's not something that you reveal and then after it's disappearing. Hopefully this kind of thing will stay and they will be seen, watched in the next future. So my time is over, so I don't know if they have any, I think the question, we don't have time for question and answer, but I'll be happy to answer to any question or any clarification or any development that anyone wants during the tea break or after the meetings. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. Thanks for having me.
I've actually got a question. While they set the stage for the next panel, let's discuss a little bit more about your work. So basically, how do you find your stories?
Finding the stories, I prefer to read the news. When you read the news, then you can see if it's a good story or not. But the problem in documentary is that reading the news, you have to see the development of a story, and you have to see how interesting it is to be released in a few months from now, because between the facts and the final product, there is a few months. So you have to make sure it's going to be interesting.
So for the latest documentary that won the Emmy Award, how long did it take you?
Surprisingly, the Emmy nomination in 2018, it took me just 10, 15 days to film it, and probably, and probably maybe 1 month, 6 weeks of post-production. This one was longer, Ukraine, I mean. It was a bit longer, but in terms of filming, it was maybe 20 days, and post-production, I would say between 3 months, 4 months, if no technical issue, because as you can imagine, there's a lot of things. Nothing goes smooth. There's always something. There's always something that doesn't happen. So we have to fix it.
Okay. You might not want to reveal this, but I'm just going to ask anyway. What are you working on now? Is there a project?
There is a project. It's going to be in Ukraine, and it's going to be in Gaza, and it's going to be in Europe.
Cool.
So, but it's investigative. But now we're trying to do longer format. We go more than 70, 90 minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Musin, and congratulations on the awards.
Thank
you very much. Now, our next panel is on the battle for relevance, listening to and learning from our audiences. Our moderator is the former chair of the ABU News Group and the head of news and sports at FBC Fiji, Indra Singh. Welcome.
Thank you. I know it's the late part of the afternoon and a lot of people have left, but I hope those who have remained will pick up a lot from here. You know, Walt Disney said some time back, it's a quote, we keep moving forward, opening new doors, doing new things because we are curious. And because of that, it keeps on leading us down new paths. Some time back, we were talking about news avoidance. Now we talk about audience first news. Joining me on stage this afternoon, a great team that have all the expertise and they know what they're talking about. First of all, Shivan Daniel, Group Director, Capital Maharaja Group out of Sri Lanka. Shivan. Next up, we've got No stranger to us, Matthew O'Sullivan, the Managing Editor, Asia Pacific News from the ABC Australia. Suritra Charanwong, the co-founder and CEO of Telscore Company Limited. Welcome her on stage. And it's absolutely great to have Onjon Lee, a reporter from KBS out of Korea. So as I mentioned, there's been a lot of changes, etc., that's happened. So we'll dive straight into it, knowing we've got 30 minutes. Shivan, I'll come to you first. You are on my right, so also he's got a bit of a problem with his throat, so please bear with him. He's not been feeling too well. What is audience first news? When we talk about audience first, what is it? Because we were talking about news avoidance some time back. Now we're talking about audience first.
Thank you, Indra. Yeah, my throat sounds really bad. What happens in Bangkok stays in Bangkok. So, look, what we're doing here is incredibly important. We are here for people. And news means freedom. I think that is the fundamental principle which we need to understand. And so, where our audience is where we should be. And I think it is time that we reframe the very idea of news, the very idea of news. We've drawn a periphery around news for decades, and we are struggling to remain within that periphery because the rest of the world, frankly, has moved on. And we're terrified of things like AI because we've not, taken any kind of tectonic shift in the idea of news for maybe the past several decades. So the idea really is to move from 0 to 1, if it were. It is an idea where you take the fundamental understanding of news and move it beyond simply reporting the news. If you think about industries that have been completely upended, examples such as Airbnb, Uber, SpaceX, what they've done is create markets that never existed before. And that is the opportunity that exists for news because of one really important factor. News has the trust of the people. If you have the commodity of trust, and if politicians don't have that trust anymore, then you have an obligation to use the platform and the power you have to move beyond simply reporting. And I think the discussion then has to move on from not just the future of news, but is news really the future?
By the way, the floor is also open for this panel. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll get you involved in it as well. Now, Matt, we've all gone down that path. Well, most broadcasters, a majority that we speak to, it's all about audience, because if we don't give what the audience wants, we are losing them. The question then arises, is this a challenge for us as broadcasters to capture audience for all our hard work that we're putting in, day out?
Absolutely, because if we're not relevant and people don't see our stories, what is the point of us existing? Our job is not to suddenly become full of the news of the Kardashians every day, not to become clickbait. It's about understanding what are people wanting from us. We have a pretty good idea of what our traditional audiences want from us. What's been the real challenge is understanding what younger audiences want digital savvy audiences want. And if you don't go out and find that out and talk to people, you are never going to compete when there is so much content out there. When you're up against something like Netflix or Paramount or Prime, we can't compete with them for entertainment. We can compete on compelling, human-driven stories that make a difference to people's lives. And our mantra at the ABC now is journalism with impact. Stories that impact on people's lives, that bring about change, that give people a feeling of connectedness and a reason for hope. And that's a really important thing to do.
Now, Shweta, you deal with a lot of young people, you deal with a lot of the social media influencers, and these are people that nowadays people would take to before they take to the news channel. How much of an impact have they made from your point of view, for news channels and broadcasters to say, hey, hold on, we're losing our audiences to the new group of people, and we need to quickly get back on track?
Well, I guess first off, I'm really excited to be even included in this panel because we have been working with creators, content creators, for more than 10 years. Just our initiatives ourselves are registered with about 100,000 individuals. So it's a very exciting landscape. So coming to that questions, I think a lot of people think we're losing, journalism is losing audience to the creators, content creators, and content creators, are mainly, about fast content, right? But right now, for instance, in countries like Thailand, Southeast Asia, we have a lot of news individual that are producing content on social media, on TikTok, on Twitter, as we know. And we see exciting collaborations between news company that allows these individuals to be free in that space. And it's a collaboration between news company and this, what do you call it? Individuals that are actually part of the news company. Yeah, so we're working a lot with that space. And to extend that, there are also educators, there are people with engineering background that are creators to help reshape the very education phase in Thailand. So just my 2 cents for now.
Perfect. I'll come back to you with a couple more questions later. Onjun, you're a pretty young, vibrant person out of Korea, reporter at KBS. Now, they say that we've gone down this path of audience-first news because that's what the young audience want. What's the feel like in where you come from?
There's a good question. And young people don't have any interest in news, especially. It's a fact. But when they face the new circumstances related to themselves, they got interested in the news. Can I have video? Is a good example. I will show you.
KBS와 연세대 연구팀이 합동 추적한 결과 사기 조직과 연계된 것으로 보이는 악성 임대인 176명의 존재를 최초로 확인했습니다.
전국의 빌라왕들이 몇 명이나 되는지 추적했습니다. 먼저 국토교통부 건축물 대장에서 50채 이상 가진 다주택 임대인을 추렸습니다.
Kind of, rental housing fraud in South Korea last year. We are reporting
이들
about
중에
it.
같은 건물, 빌라나 오피스텔을 나눠 산 임대인들을 선별했습니다. 이렇게 완성한 연결망입니다.
It's a map we invented.
누군지 살펴봤더니 지난해 말 전세 사기에 사회적 관심이 쏠리게 한 숨지 빌라왕들 여기다 있습니다. 현재 당국이 전세 사기 혐의로 수사 중인 빌라왕 24명 전부 이 안에 있습니다.
Ill-intentioned homeowner in cheaper apartment
최소
area
14명,
in South
최대
Korea.
148명과 같은 빌라 건물을 나눠 샀습니다.
다주택 임대인들 사이의 연결고리가 분명치 않습니다. 2019년 중심이 뚜렷이
We
형성되기
use social
시작합니다.
network
여러
analysis
임대인이
tool.
같은
We made
빌라
a map.
건물을 나눠 산 거래량이 늘었다는 뜻입니다.
The thicker the
176명
line
가운데
is, lines
주택도시
are, the
보증공사가 악성
stronger their
임대인으로 분류한
relationships
인물은
are.
50명에 불과합니다. 나머지 126명은 관리 대상도 아닙니다. 전세 사기 조직과
So
깊은
we
연관이 있는
reported
악성 임대인
about estimate of
176명은
the
어디에
amount
집을
of
소유하고
damage.
있을까요?
It's a
총 2만 6천여 채가 수도권을
billion
중심으로
dollars,
전국에 흩어져 있습니다.
as a fraud.
2018년부터 집중적으로 매입을 시작해 2021년에
So, if we could just put the
8,900여 채로
volume down for
정점을
that.
찍은
So,
뒤
just
사기
coming
피해
back to you on
추정액은
this,
최대 1조
is this
8,500억 원이
something that
넘습니다.
entices the young people to see and say, hey, it's what I want to see on television?
Yeah, but most of victims are people under 40.
Right.
It's a younger generation because this kind of fraud happen in the cheaper apartment, but newlywed couples and beginners cannot afford standard types of apartment or deluxe type apartment. They should live in the cheaper apartment. And ill-intentioned homeowner manipulate the system error. So most of them are younger generations. So when we report about it, many young generation or young people comment about it. And this kind of, this series, the reporting series, went viral so much in South Korea.
Now, Matt, I come back to you. You at the ABC, very particular about how you do things. And when you try to do things like putting audience first, have you got it wrong, or is there a chance of getting it wrong?
I think, no. I think where we got it wrong was when we weren't talking to audiences. Okay. In 2019, we had a national election, and the ABC and every other media organisation completely misread what was going to happen. The polls were wrong, our coverage was wrong, we all incorrectly predicted the outcome because we weren't talking to people enough outside our traditional audience about what was happening in the country. In 2022, we flipped that, and it was all about old-fashioned journalism, freeing reporters up, getting them out of the newsroom, onto the streets, in the outer suburbs, in our country towns, and saying, what are the things that are important to you? We started collating all of that information in databases. We did audience call-outs for inviting the community to tell us what were the issues important to them. We invited the community to come to roundtable discussions with journalists to talk to us about the issues that mattered. And that was how we made the decisions around the stories we commissioned leading up to the 2022 election. They were driven by people, not by politicians, talking about what they wanted to talk about. We could put the hard questions to politicians about the things the audience wanted to know about. And we got it so much more on the money. The audience engagement was so much higher. And there's still work to do, but that's now what underpins our whole strategy. If we don't get our reporters back on the streets, when I started 3 decades ago, that was our daily mission, was to go and talk to people. We're trying to retrain our journalists now about how to do that. But at the core of it is old-fashioned journalism. Talk to people, find out what matters to them. There's your story. And that's what we're trying to get back to, and it's working more and more. We're doing fewer stories, but we're doing them better. And that is really resonating with audiences.
So quality over quantity, of course. Matt, I think when we talk to a lot of newsrooms and news heads in particular, they talk about lazy journalism as well. Some come into it for maybe different reasons rather than pure passion of journalism. Now, that brings me to Sri Lanka a couple of years ago with everything that happened in Sri Lanka. What was it like seeing the journalists go onto the streets, and talk to the people and report amid the crisis? How was it, and what was the response from audiences for those coverages across the board in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, it was quite an experience for us, obviously, because it's something we hadn't seen before in Sri Lanka. But I think what's important also is here to discern the reporting on the crisis, the economic crisis itself, and reporting on all of the signs that were visible in plain sight for years. All of the politicians that we probably didn't call out, or we did call out, and the people weren't able to discern the difference between what was right and wrong. And I think both for Sri Lankan media organizations as well as the people, it was a time of reckoning, where the importance of the truth, and sometimes the truth isn't easy to digest. I was listening to some of the panels this morning, and there was lots of effort in trying to sugarcoat the truth. It's impossible. It's not possible. Sometimes we have to go to a doctor and the medicine is truly bitter. Surgery isn't something any of us look forward to, but it is essential. And when you're dealing with the truth, there's only one way to deal with it head on. And I think that's what we continue to do in Sri Lanka, because we have a lot of work to do. It is a beautiful island with so much of potential, but it's been ruined by decades of political corruption and incompetence. And so dealing with that kind of situation through the platform of news, when you're putting forward the truth, is quite complex. And the way to do it today, because news, in a sense, has also been democratized, Indra. Everybody with a mobile phone has not just the ability to become a reporter, but also access to reports. And so with that connection, you then have to not just sit in your ivory tower and report, but as Matt quite rightly said, head down to the people move with the people, and most importantly, listen to the people. And you can't listen to the people on a digital device. You have to be in front of them, face to face.
Most definitely, that is what true journalism is about. Now, coming to you with what Sivan just said, maybe I could be wrong, but 5, 10, maybe in the last 10 years, we've seen journalism hit, some would say, very low periods of quality that was coming out. Have content creators given media houses a bit of a shock and a bit of that, jump start that they needed to get back to what Matt's saying, the good old-fashioned journalism?
Definitely. I work with a lot of young people, and I've seen them, themselves, within 5 years, they become small media company. Right, so they become themselves now they have news unit within themselves and learn about the journalism, the classic journalism, and talking they're very digitized. But in fact, like what Matt and Sivan said is so true. It's all about getting yourself out there, and really talk to the people, right? I mean, these are the examples of people that we've just collaborated without any sequences, but we see that these people are the very face of the landscape that we're talking about, and they are actually very digitized. But what they do every day is going out, talking to people, because even themselves are now a small entity, and they need to do fact checks. But the flexibility of being very independent allows them to be kind of the helping hand, the scouting tools for big news houses. I work with at least 10,000 of them to do to report fact-checking tips back to the news houses. Yeah, so that's what we encourage every day. Have you done these kind of standards? And our initiatives right now are actually also trying to certify them as becoming small journalism. Yeah, so that's very important, because there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of misinformation out there. It's a scary world.
Now, coming to, again, I'm bringing you again from a perspective of digital, and Asia is renowned to be the leaders in digital development. Once it started going, we spoke about citizen journalism, etc. earlier on, but every young person now has sort of become a content creator in one way or the other, be it entertainment, be it somebody skateboarding somewhere, or be it someone just walking on a rope for having fun. But that sort of become more, the appetite is growing. Will you agree with that statement?
Yeah, it's a good question. Nowadays, people are watching a lot of entertainment things than news or document. But we need to keep up with the new waves, new phenomenon. Can I have a picture? There's another example of investigative journalism at KBS. In 2019, we report about Korean spy who worked for Japanese colonial government. The point is, the team care about the new phenomenon. People prefer watching documentary on Netflix, not TV set. So the team worried a lot, and they recruited younger generation staff. And they even hire voice or sounds director who had worked in entertainment field to keep up with the new waves. So after reporting, a lot of people, especially younger generation, comment that it's very interesting, even though the topic is historical. Yeah, that's the way we have to keep up with the new wave.
Matt, in Australia and the Pacific Islands, including New Zealand, what's the way from your expertise? What do you think the audience want more of nowadays? Is it good, old, well-researched story, or is it some fun fact, unresearched piece that would gain more traction?
No, I think it's about knowing what your remit is, depending on who you are, and that's the sort of content. for us, it's very important that we maintain trust, as we've heard, but also maintain the quality of our journalism. We want to be on those platforms and people know that if they see it's from us, they can trust it. And so the storytelling has to have integrity. But that doesn't mean we tell it in the boring old worthy way of the ABC. We need to tell it in an engaging way that fits the platform, make sure it's fit for purpose. For us, it's been about thinking about, well, who is the audience on this platform that dictates how we will tell this story. And trying to find your authentic voice in that space as a big media company is actually really challenging, particularly when it's more driven by personality. But we are having success because I think the space we're also playing in is breaking news is everywhere. Where we can bring value is with the context and the nuance to say, okay, so what does this mean and what might happen next? And that's where audiences will really respond.
And I would like to add here that, in the last 2-3 years, the ABC has broken some of the biggest stories in the Pacific Islands from a very different perspective compared to because of the problems the Pacific media have faced. Is that something that is right up there of the changing landscape?
Yeah, absolutely, because we have this very privileged position, as Nezrin said before, where we're protected by an act of parliament. We do have international reach and we pride ourselves on the journalism. We've had Pacific media houses, not you, Indra, but others say, we need the ABC in the region because you can tell the stories we can't. But we have to do that. In the Pacific, the audience is on Facebook. They're not necessarily listening to us on Radio Australia or on Instagram or coming to our website. So we have to be on Facebook. We have to be trying to talk to people there. That's where we get our biggest traction. But we have to think about how do we sound, how do we look on those platforms.
Now, Siobhan, yes, it's all fine. We got to change stuff. We got to produce things that our audience wants because we want the eyes back. We want the advertising dollars in. But the catch is, it does cost money to get all those things done. And if revenue is not flowing in as, companies want, that does pose a challenge.
It's a challenge of leadership. It's not a challenge of news or journalism. It's a challenge of leadership. And I think, opportunity always comes disguised as hard work. So this question doesn't arise in my mind because if you're innovating and if you're leading as you should be, and if you recognize that it's time news must change and must be engaged with communities in ways other than simply reporting news. For example, you must be building bridges for people. You have to be involved in rural infrastructure. You have to be doing things that educate your communities on things like geopolitics, helping them make sense of things like that, so that you're creating a more wholesome community and a more wholesome society. If you're doing the right things and if you're leading as you should be, then I think the question of revenue doesn't arise. It is a question of making the most of this incredible opportunity we have with these incredible new tools and weaponry that we can use to engage with audience. I think that's the kind of news leadership that we really need for the future.
Excellent. Any questions from the floor for our panelists? No? Everyone's tired?
Sorry, one more point is that I think we need to change our perception of what news is, because our audience's view of news is very, very different. And what we think of as fluff or fashion or entertainment, they still see as news content. And we, I think, have been stuck in the mindset of news is serious. And it doesn't mean that if there's an earthquake where hundreds of people are dead, that you're suddenly still smiling when you tell that story on Instagram. But it means we need to think more cleverly about what we think of news and how we tell it.
Just giving an example of where I come from, we started an entertainment section in a major news bulletin every night. It's not so because we wanted to, but we researched and the demand is there. People want to know what Justin Bieber is doing, People want to know what our local singers are doing this week. And that has got more traction on Facebook when we put it out there than most of the other political stories. So that brings me to my next question, my final one for you this afternoon. Facebook and other social media platforms in and around Asia and the world have taken off in the last couple of years or few years. Do you think that traditional broadcasters still have a chance, based on the experience of working with those who are creating content for socials, etc.?
Definitely, and absolutely. And answering this quickly, but I also have like questions for us all. Like, I don't need the slides, thank you. Yeah. I think even more so with the things that are going on right now, the AI and AI regulation hasn't been like really strongly established. We are in a big chaos right now, and we need the trust factor. And these trust factors are actually coming from journalism, right? So social media out there, the platforms that we're trying to work with, even like social media, like what do you call it, authority to kind of like help us do fact checking. So even small initiatives like us are crying out for help with them. Yeah. So, but the future is definitely circles around trust. And I have a little bit of a question myself when you ask, like if the audience have some questions. I think we can kind of like, get from the conversation that has been going around today that we need to collaborate, right? Like news houses need to collaborate with the communities. One quick question for us all and also for you, Indra. Like how do you see this happening? Like, what are you guys doing right now in collaboration with the communities?
I was talking to Matt and I think Shivan earlier on and a couple of other people. We've had too many of these. We sit down, we talk, we go back, we come back 1 year later, we sit down, we talk again. Are we really actioning what we are preaching? Because if we're not, we are losing our audience and we are responsible for it. Let's not blame the audience. Let's blame ourselves. Let's blame each and every individual in newsrooms and media houses. So that's my take. And I'm a very firm believer that when we do too much of this, and if you keep on doing it every time and not going back and actioning it, we are losing it big time.
I think it's about partnering with the right people, putting the right people together, that we can have faith in their editorial standards that will align with what we do. We have run talent funds where we reach out to influencers to invite them to collaborate with us, to bring them in, to try to work with them. It's had mixed success, but I think that is a really important way forward.
To prepare the discussion, I interviewed more than 20 people. The former leader of investigative journalism team at KBS, he said to me, there's no content which targeted specific generation or ages on purpose, but if we report something very useful or relevant to specific ages, they try to get interested in contents which we made. So content is so important. A platform, we should keep up with the new wave of platform. So the problem is content, what content is, not platform.
You can still hear, your voice sounds good, I still can.
I think you're absolutely right. I think collaboration is the key to move forward, and we have the opportunity to do that. And the major topic today has been AI. And it's really important that we take a deep dive into exactly what we're talking about here, okay? The processing power required to make AI ubiquitous is enormous, and years and years in the future, okay? We're going to be experiencing the incremental advantages of AI, I think, for several years to come, which will be fantastic. But there's no way on God's earth, mathematically, that AI can replace this man next to me with 3 decades of journalism experience. The nuances, the experience, the wisdom that this kind of journalist comes with is not going to be replaced by a computer that essentially depends on data that is already inserted into the internet, and all of the data in the world is not on the internet. It is a very small percentage of it. So let's get that into perception in the first place and understand what a massive responsibility we all have as journalists, as news leaders to our societies and communities.
I think that's some very fantastic insight by the four panelists, ladies and gentlemen. A big round of applause for all of them. As we wrap up this afternoon for this session, I think the takeaway from here is, are we going to action what we're discussing? Are we going to take a deep dive? Are we going to look at the future of news, combine it with AI, look at the positives, and come out better and make our newsrooms go better? Let's not blame social media, etc. all the time. Let's look at our own selves as well. Thank you very much for your attention. Very good afternoon, guys.
Thank you very much, Indra. Distinguished panelists, please remain on stage for the group photo before you leave. Thank you very much. It is time now for another investigative journalism showcase. This time is CNA's Walk the Line, presented by producer Jonathan Xie. Welcome.
Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Chia. I'm from CNA. I'd like to start by thanking Asia Pacific Broadcasting Union for inviting CNA to share about our documentary series. It's truly an honor and a privilege to be here. Walk the Line takes a close and timely look at the sudden increase of Chinese migrants coming to the United States. This has big impacts on US immigration rules, border security, and the relationship between US and China. While many documentaries have covered this illegal migration journey to the US, we wanted Walk the Line to be different for its unique scale, its deep access, and its personal and human portrayal of the Chinese migrants. If you haven't watched the series, this is the trailer to give you a sense of what it's about.
I can see their leader, I can see their well-being, but I don't understand why they come on here.
是在中国现在迫不消极。
我就想到我的孩子，他的以后的出路是好的，是轻省的，不要像我这么累。
跟着我这边啊，跟着我灯光。不管问题是什么目标，达成生命是的。
跟想象的不一样，有点脏，像没有走出中国一样。
So why make this show? The idea for Walk the Line came from social media. Around mid-2022, our CNA correspondent Wei Du started noticing videos on social media showing Chinese citizens crossing the dense jungle of the Darien Gap. These videos were tagged with the hashtag 走线, which directly translates into Walk the Line. So Wei was fascinated by these journeys. She, along with the other producer, Anderson Xia, spent countless hours going through social media feeds. So using their language skills and their knowledge of China, they discovered support groups and guides on platforms like YouTube, Douyin, and Telegram that helped aspiring Chinese migrants. And these sources helped Wei Du and Anderson as well, because they were able to map out the route and come up with a plan for our documentary. So our production plan was always to start in Ecuador. Why Ecuador? It's because it's the closest Latin American country to the US at that time, which allowed Chinese nationals to enter visa-free. So from there, we plan to follow their path using a series of buses, domestic flights, and a trek through the Darien Gap jungle into Panama. For background info, the Darien Gap is a dense jungle between Colombia and Panama. There are no roads, And the migrants have to trek for 5 to 7 days through river crossings, muddy cliffs, cartel territories, and indigenous criminal gangs. So no surprise that it's known as the world's most dangerous jungle. After that, we would fly to the southern Mexican border, catch them enter from Guatemala, and follow them all the way to the US border. Now, because the migrants were cautious about strangers online, we decided to go to Ecuador without reaching out to anyone first. We only knew about key spots where Chinese migrants gathered. Okay. So in Quito, Ecuador, Wei-Du and I moved into a guest house that was popular among Chinese migrants. When we told the guest house owner of our project, she not only welcomed us, but also shared her observations, which is an unprecedented increase in number of Chinese travelers arriving in Ecuador, but at the same time, the Ecuadorian government being unsure of what to do about it. So when we first checked in, the migrants were naturally quite suspicious of us and hesitant. So Wei-Du had a really good idea. On my way up to Quito, she told me to buy snacks from Singapore, and one of which is Chinese barbecue pot called bak kwa. And when we brought out the bak kwa in the guest house, everybody's faces just lit up, like they started talking to us. So our team has affectionately coined the term bak kwa diplomacy from that. So we, of course, not just the snacks, we had to put on our best charming selves to talk to as many migrants as we could because it's a numbers game. Surprisingly, it didn't take long for us to earn the trust of 4 individuals who agreed to be featured. We realized that these Chinese migrants, who had made the biggest decisions of their lives, had been isolated on this journey, keeping everything a secret even before they left China, without anyone to confide in. So the combination of their isolation, plus finally meeting someone who's not in a position to exploit them and interested in their stories, they just opened up and their stories poured out. So with the help of these initial participants, more migrants gradually came in forward to share their experiences with us as we went on the migrant route. Our research and reporting uncovered several key insights for the documentary series. We heard directly from the migrants about their motivations for making the dangerous trip, which ranged from a lack of freedom of speech to religious persecution, but mostly economic reasons. We heard many accounts of how businesses never recovered fully from the zero COVID policy back home, and they feel like they have no choice but to go to the US for a better life. Then, of course, we witnessed their spontaneous reactions to the difficult and dangerous journey they undertook, especially the disparity between what they were expecting the journey to be like and what they actually experienced on the ground. An example was when we first started talking to some of these migrants about the Darien Gap crossing, they described it as a simple hike with a little camping on the side. And one particularly ill-informed migrant brought with her only high heels and flats, no trekking shoes. But what they realized very quickly when they arrived was that there was actual mortal danger and that a few of them almost lost their lives. On the ground footage, we traveled with the migrants, capturing this raw and unfiltered footage of their journey. And this included the constant extortion they faced in Mexico from both government officials and smuggling gangs.
太恐怖了，
所以你觉得后面的人你会跟他们讲不要来了？
已经说了。
对，不管为了什么目标，你搭上生命是的。
当时就想自己都放弃生命了，那时候我都想不抓了，死了算了，就想这样。
爸爸钱不抢光了？那个，爸爸，哎呦，人没事吧？没事啊。哎呀，吓到了是不是？把我吓到了。
全部抢光了。
哎，
我们明天还瘦身了，把衣服都脱光了，全部都抢了。
什么人抢的？
起码是6批人在那里，每一个人带批人，然后你主动的把包全部翻掉，翻掉以后把衣服全部脱掉，手女的一个都不放过。
好，平安就好，平安就好。
我现在在这里动不了，撑不了钱，
平安。
吃饭都没钱。
啊，没事没事。
Now, besides these harrowing stories from the migrants, we also spoke with residents in California living along the border with Mexico, who were directly affected by the sudden influx of migrants. So their interviews highlighted the social and political tensions arising from the migration crisis. One of the first things we did in our reporting was to build a network of reliable sources. While we had some information from Chinese migrants, it was often incomplete or misleading. To get better details, we reached out to international organizations working along the migration route. For example, staff from Médecins Sans Frontières in Colombia helped us to confirm the routes across the Darien Gap and shared tips on navigating the tough terrain. In Panama, UNHCR staff guided us through the process of accessing migrant camps, especially during a time of big riots. The IOM UN Latin American office provided us with the latest migrant numbers and local news updates. Of course, we also worked with local fixers in the countries we visited. We needed their deep knowledge and experience to help us connect with smugglers, activists, and residents. This allowed us to capture the full picture of the migration journey for Walk the Line. Reporting for Walk the Line took us into unfamiliar and dangerous areas, including regions controlled by drug cartels and gangs. From the start, we planned strategies to keep our crews safe in these hostile environments. For example, we hired a security team that trained us in handling hostile situations prior to the trip and escorted us through Latin America. They helped us set up a daily check-in protocol where, using a combination of methods like a security app and satellite phones, the crew on the ground would constantly update our status with the company and management throughout the trip. The security measures went as far as chartering a helicopter to be on standby during the stint where we were supposed to cross the Darien Gap in case we needed a medevac. Our local fixers and security advisors gave us vital advice on avoiding dangers. There were times when the local security advisors heard chatter that we were attracting too much attention, bringing potential hostility towards us and the migrants we were following from the cartels, which we had to then tweak our production operations, such as use a smaller boom pole, move in a smaller group, and to lower the temperature of our presence. Another example in Mexico was our crew was following the smugglers' van in our own vehicle. When their van suddenly stopped by the road and they were told to get out and walk by the bushes, the crew was about to follow them, but our fixers stopped us and said, hey, no, that's too dangerous. So we had to just drive on. And true enough, those migrants, it was a trap for them and they were all robbed. So you can imagine what a nasty, messy situation it would have been if the crew had followed them. So these combined efforts really greatly reduced the risk that we faced. Keeping our sources safe and anonymous was a top priority for a show like this. We used strict masking protocols for those who didn't want their identities revealed. Some of them were worried about the safety of their families in China. Others wanted to remain anonymous in case things in the US didn't work out and they wanted to return to China. Only a few people had access to unmasked material, and we kept untreated footage separate from the company's internal system to prevent unauthorized access. We followed the highest ethical standards throughout our reporting. This meant getting informed consent from our interviewees, being clear about our intentions, and avoiding anything that can compromise our work's integrity. We made it clear to the migrants from the start that we couldn't offer any material assistance to them due to legal and ethical reasons. This included not giving them a ride in our vehicle, not lending them any money, and not exchanging any currencies with them. Having this agreement up front ensured that we didn't get into ethically or legally compromising situations with our profiles. I recall an experience with one of our main profiles, a father, you saw him in a video earlier, traveling with his wife and 14-year-old daughter. He needed to withdraw cash desperately in Colombia before they crossed the jungle because they ran out of money. So he spent half a day walking around town with his Union Pay card trying to withdraw cash, but all the ATMs in that town only accepted Visa. So in tears and desperate, he came to me and asked me can you just lend me some money and I'll transfer it to you on WeChat. But, I can't due to the reasons I mentioned before. So luckily, he met another migrant who had Visa cards and he got the money out that way. So there were quite a few of these tough ethical decisions that we had to make. Given the importance and timeliness of the topic, we believe Walk the Line can significantly influence the conversation around immigration and border security. We hope the thoughtful and personal approach can help inform better policy making. So as of the 1st of July, Ecuador announced it will suspend visa-free entry for Chinese citizens due to a worrying increase in irregular migration. And the following day, the US deported a group of Chinese migrants who entered the country illegally, marking the first large charter flight deportation since 2018. And earlier this month, the US and Panama signed an agreement to close the passage of illegal immigrants through the Darien Gap. So by presenting a nuanced and empathetic portrayal of Chinese migrants, we believe the documentary can encourage viewers to rethink their preconceived notions and promote a more compassionate public discussion on this issue. Thank you all for your time and attention. We appreciate your interest in Walk the Line and the important issues it addresses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Now it is my turn to moderate a panel, and the topic is Future of News, What's Next? What's next? Okay, so let me introduce our panelists. Zhang Xulei, from the Director of CGTN Digital, onto the stage. We also have Asel Musagalieva-Tang, founder of EDU Tech Future and Microsoft in Education Global Training Partner. We have Bei Fang, President of Radio Free Asia, welcome. And Joe Hironaka, Chief of Unit Communication and Information, UNESCO Bangkok. Welcome, welcome. Okay, I believe we have a presentation by Bei Fang, President of Radio Free Asia. So we're going to start with a 5-minute presentation, then we'll go into the discussions.
Okay, this is on. Wonderful. So yeah, I wanted to, it's really nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And 5 minutes, I will try to make it quick. So I wanted to introduce you guys to what Radio Free Asia is and what we do. My background is very different from the others. I'm not a technologist, but I'm the president of Radio Free Asia. We broadcast to countries in Asia that don't have free press. And our mission is to actually be a surrogate broadcaster. So in countries where news is censored, we provide the sort of domestic news that people in those countries would be getting if it weren't censored. So if you on the map, our coverage area, we broadcast in Mandarin, Cantonese, Tibetan, and we have the world's only Uyghur service. And we broadcast into China, and then we broadcast into North Korea in Korean, and then in Southeast Asia, we broadcast in Burmese, Cambodian, Laotian, and Vietnamese. And then we more recently started a unit called Benar News, where we broadcast to the Philippines, to Thailand, Malaysia. We broadcast in Bengali, and then also in the Pacific Islands. And the idea is that we are funded by the U.S. government, but we are completely editorially independent. And the idea is that we're not broadcasting propaganda from the U.S. We want to maintain the trust of being a completely of being a trusted news media in these different countries. So what we do, because we don't have people on the ground in the countries that we cover, it's called exile journalism. And so, for example, our Uyghur correspondents in the U.S., they stay up all night. Is my microphone okay? Okay. They stay up all night. One of them calls, hundreds of police stations, but has very good contacts at this point, and is very well sourced. And so increasingly, we have found that news organizations are coming to us for information about how to do this kind of exile journalism. And sorry, let me go to the next one. So, for example, we broke the news of the historic anti-lockdown white paper protests in China half a day before any of the other media did, and that was from our work looking at Chinese social media. And what we would do is take the post from Chinese social media, take it out before it was censored, and then put it on Twitter or X, and influencers would be the ones to increase the reach of it, and that's how people actually got the news about it. And so one of the things that I think is very important in the future of news, especially because Reporters Without Borders, in their most recent Press Freedom Index, has said that governments are increasingly cracking down on press freedom. So it's very important to be able to do this kind of work covering countries that are increasingly closed and off limits to press. And one of the things that we created also a year or so ago is the Asia Fact Check Lab, based both in Asia and in the US. And that takes basically, they're starting in Mandarin, and they're taking social media posts and dissecting them. So things that are disinformation that are being propagated and spread around Mandarin social media, they will take them, and with AI, it's more and more important to have this kind of capability. So, for example, there were the Maui wildfires last year, and there was something going around Mandarin social media saying that they were actually created by, that they weren't wildfires at all, that it was because of a US weapons test. So our Asia Fact Check Lab looked at this and broke it down and actually did a reverse image search and found that the videos that were being circulated were actually taken from a windstorm in a town in Louisiana in 2018. So it's this kind of work that I think is increasingly important, both pushing back immediately on social media and on disinformation in social media. And then also, I agree with what people have said in the past about investigative journalism. I think basically going deep and going quickly.
Thank you very much. Next, we have a presentation from Zhang Xulei, Director of CGT and Digital. Hi.
First of all, good afternoon, and thanks for ABU News Committee inviting me, and thanks Thai PBS for this nice trip, and thanks Deborah and Claire giving me this time to have this excellent panel together, and we're talking about the future of news. I was very much inspired by this morning about the panel's speakers, and so I tried to contribute to, so I did this slideshow by the noon for 20 pages, but I try to wrap up into 3 minutes. First of all, I wanted to show you that CGTN's application to AI. We see AI as a tool of revolution rather than a revolution of tool. So first, allow me to play video clips that we did with the, yes. Can we play?
Once upon a time, people in Chentangguan City lived in peace and happiness. Commander Li Jing of the Chentangguan City and his 7-year-old son, Ne Jia, guarded the place. But the Dragon King of the East Sea and his sons ruled over Chentangguan.
AI process video called The Rebirth of the Young Hero Naza. This month, we're targeting the young people worldwide because they are interested in a lot of Chinese legendary stories. But we believe that we can only use AI for this legendary storytelling, not for the news telling. And this one is we made in 7 days instead of if you do animation works instead of 3 months previously if we did this production. So
in a fierce battle.
CGTN Digital, we started 12 years ago. We cope with the trend of changing media consumptions that you can see on this slideshow, that people's consumption of the media starting from 45 minutes to 4 hours on the mobile side. And we just randomly cope up with that development when CGTN Digital started 12 years ago. And now we have approximately 380 million users worldwide that follow our integrated media organization, our brand. And then we examine the whole landscape, both in America and also in China, that we approximated the same, that you can see that we have these text applications and video applications and also other applications as well. And you know that how many months to reach 100 million monthly active users for all those applications? But for ChatGPT only takes 2 months. That's where user goes. And then ChatGPT, they go with a lot of services that for travel, for online shopping, for everything besides news. And this is AP when they started 2018, and the use of these AI tools to examine, to produce news. And this is, we call it traditional AI using in the news arena. So, and also Washington Post use AI news test on their website. And BBC use AI assistant Beep to interact with their users online. And CGTN use Ask Panda chatbot in 2021.
Economic news.
And we believe that AI plus strategy should be AI plus good for the people. And also, we did. We examined the in the market that like Snapchat, they use this My AI tools to open to all. They targeted young people as well globally.
Service that allows subscribers to access new features firsthand. If you're interested in getting My AI
recommended
on your
this
Snapchat, just
Snapchat.
follow the tag or
And also, this is the world's first AI news website called NewsJBT. And they grab all the headline news from different news sources and to make it look like a very much news website, which you have to verify.
Right.
And I'll show you another clips.
Who am I? Throughout history, humans have never stopped exploring the dissemination of information. Text, sound, images, videos. But I'm not just that. Overthrow traditional thinking revolution. Intelligent full process. Ushering in a new era of information dissemination.
The discussion
I am
from this point.
So, yes. So my time's up. I can hold any questions you ask.
Yeah, sure. So basically, new technologies are one of the most tangible and measurable areas that we are noticing in the news industry as well. So I'm going to direct my first question to Beifang. What are the lessons that we have learned from the past that will help us navigate the future in terms of news?
So I think the lessons from the past are the importance of maintaining authenticity in our reporting, even with the advent of all of these different voices and all of these different social media platforms. So I think it is still important to have people on the ground and people able to reach the real news that is happening in a city, in a village. Anywhere around the world. So I think that is one thing. And maintaining editorial standards in all of this. So that's why I say that the future is in pushing back on disinformation both quickly and deeply. So I think there is still very much a role for investigative journalism, but in a way that actually reaches audiences that people are interested in watching. I think some of the other presenters showed that very clearly.
Yes, and as Zhang has pointed out, that AI is playing a very emerging prominent role in creating content nowadays. So I'm going to ask Essel, from your perspective, how can we upskill journalists, and what needs to be done for us in order to be able to improve the quality of our work, as well as familiarizing ourselves with new technologies like Panda chatbots and generative AI 3D content videos?
Thanks, Claire, for the question. So those of you who will come to my workshop, all the secrets will be tomorrow morning, 9 to 12. But I'll probably say something which is my own views and analysis over the years. And by the way, I'm very recent in technology also. I'm like 3 years in technology and currently having my own startup. So really looking into upskilling and reskilling, right? We need to take a very thorough, candid check on ourselves as individuals, where we stand and where we want to go. And of course, after that, we need to look at ourselves as the organizations, right? And we need to have a very frank view of where we need to go. This is before we talk about strategy. This is before we talk about budgets and AI and everything else. So having internal perspective before you make any purchase, enable any technology. So technology is always a tool, is always the enabler, and it's never a replacement of a human skill, of human creativity, human expertise. So this is the view with which I work, and also probably another thing that is very important when we talk about future skills. We always need to start with people. So people, processes, and only then technology, and never in the reverse way. And a lot of the people and sometimes organizations are actually starting in a different way and spend a lot of budgets and efforts and energy into making it work. So the digital transformation, in fact, is not only about digital, it's about people. And that's the hardest as well, because change management and for people to adapt to something new, to learn and to be motivated to keep up with the new technology is very, very important. And probably the third point and the last point I want to make, it's been an amazing day of discussions, and thank you so much for staying for the final session. And I want to echo to what some of the speakers said, that there is a content and there is a news, right? So right now we are living in the oversaturated market of content, which is thrown at us. And if we passively, I'm not from the news side, I'm not from the broadcasting side, so if I'm the user and I'm just passively receiving it, right, I will be in a very probably low mental state if I can't control my role and what I'm doing with the technology and the content that's thrown at me from all the channels, right? All the social media and other channels that I'm using. So what is our relationship with the content and technology is probably another question, and it's a tough question that we need to talk about. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask Zhang, what's the audience response like with the content that you've just presented? Just wondering.
Well, we send out all the different content. I myself was a journalist 20 years ago, and I started from zero to build up all these digital platforms. One of the lessons I learned from all the followers worldwide is that this is a diversity thirsty for the news production, for the content that we are building. And there's I would add to the trust, there is a respect for the diversities of religions, of our beliefs, of political arenas, of everything that I think for people out there, I once saw a survey run by Facebook said 70% of the young people on Facebook, they are longer to belong for the different variety of the culture, of other culture, which is very surprisingly for our content creators. So I think for our, I'd rather say the news, because I've discussed this 5 years ago in the same, and we talk with like BBC and CNN counterparts about how we're gonna do for the deep fake after the post news area. We all believe that people have this thirsty for information and have this thirsty for engagement with other people. So we did some valuable content. It's very much valued for most of the content creators, news organizations. Yes.
Right. Joe, so what is UNESCO's view on the impact of AI on newsroom and the future of journalism education?
Yeah, thank you. So the question is on journalism education. What I'd like to do, if there's time, is to talk about journalism education with AI as the backdrop, and then talk a bit about media viability with AI as well. I might not be able to do that. When you're the last speaker on the last panel, I think my main job is to just make sure you get to go home and and relax. And the other issue, of course, is that many panelists have said some of the things that I might repeat, and I have no way of really knowing that. So I'll be jumping around a little bit. I was going to speak about the positive theory of the case for AI in the newsrooms. I don't want to make light of it, but I'm going to skip over that. But I think I'll focus just on the sort of the content generation piece and its implications on journalism education and media development in the future. I mean, maybe others have mentioned this as well, but for instance, Bloomberg, their Cyborg app, generates about 1/3 of their news content. And Associated Press generates around 40,000 articles per year through artificial intelligence. And that's not trivial. And I'm sure other speakers have addressed these trends. But what I thought about, really is, this is a question more to you than, this is more like a conjecture, but somewhere in the middle, there's a bit of a hollowing out, in some of the key formative stages of the development of journalists. I know, we all went to school, or we managed with journalists who, started out for years doing metro or local news coverage, and that's the period really where you learn some investigation skills, the ethics of reporting, protecting your sources, but also just the writing, to the style of the news organization you work for, and that is your intellectual property. So all of those sort of skills that may have existed in the past. Look, you don't become Maria Ressa or Seymour Hersh or Carl Bernstein overnight. You don't become a great investigative journalist or a great editor overnight. And so, how do we address that gap, sort of that formative gap along the development curve of journalists when, as I mentioned, a lot of those sort of routine news stories are being written by AI. Yeah. And I think journalism education for this generation will include a lot of these hands-on working AI tools. I think that applies even to the, across this region, even in the Pacific. It's said that a search in generative AI, like in ChatGPT, is 15 times more energy intensive than a Google search. I don't know if that's, there are various ways to estimate it. So that's, but it's the media, it's the internet platforms that are providing that service, and one way or the other. So these apps are available on the phone. I think, and I don't think it's an obvious point, but students should develop a sort of a competency and an agency, a sense of agency in relation to mastering and integrating AI newsroom tools. I mean, then that curriculum needs to exist. And I was going to add a slide deck with all the QR codes of our journalism training products, including on AI and journalism. And maybe there's some other way to share that. But looking broadly ahead, sort of this learning and adaptive mindset to digital transformation, it's essential. It applies across every field of knowledge work. And journalists are ultimately knowledge workers. That's why this subject is so resonant in a way, these genuine risks of displacement that exist. And so, for instance, Esel's 3-hour masterclass tomorrow on generative AI, I find that incredibly exciting. I hope it's mainstreamed across this region. I wish all my staff could go, and I wish I could go if I had free time. The other thing I wanted to point out So if I can underscore just one point, I know I'm a bit jumping around here. This isn't journalism education per se, but it's that we need to go much further than debunking, checking. Debunking is like cooking someone a fish, for dinner. And I think media and information literacy, which is an area where UNESCO works, it's basically a digital skillings program based on critical thinking and a human rights-based approach. Assessing news through critical thinking and the human rights lens is like teaching how to fish, and I can't even believe I actually said that. But and the value proposition from the media side, I would say, is that it generates smarter and more loyal generations of readers to your brand. This human part of the news or reporting equation really can't be replicated by technology. So, point being that while debunking and fact-checking is an important service, and it's maybe more than just cooking a fish for your friends, it's the broader practice of assessing news bias and so forth is what we call media and information literacy. And we are working, that's why we are working with the Asian Broadcasting Union on the Media for Peace awards based on promoting media literacy, digital literacy, data literacy around subjects like the planet, like people, and like Earth. So we're very proud to be doing that. Another area that I think AI can be leveraged is, well, according to UNESCO, there's more than 7,000 languages in the world. About 3,000 of those are in Asia Pacific. Around 4,000 languages can be attached to a sort of a written form, and yet very few, the vast majority of these are facing extinction in this century. And one thing about AI technology, I mean, it's pretty good at translation. Like, I don't know if you know the case of Le Monde, but now they publish 40 news stories. What time am I at?
Yeah, we still have 10 minutes.
So Le Monde is publishing about 40 news stories a day in English, so 250 or so, more on Sundays. And they're doing this with less than 10 editors. What I read was around 7 editors whose function is to really check the quality of the writing and to align it to the style that is specifically Le Monde, which you may know, but you can guess. It really is their intellectual property. And in many ways, there's just no further excuse to silo your reporting, your news generation in one language. It can be, and I think what that points to as well is again, I mentioned indigenous and ethnic minority languages. I don't want to sound naive. It's not, it's harder to generate translated versions of these, but hiring bilingual editors who speak ethnic minority languages, there's a value proposition there. It can expand readership, it can improve the accuracy and the trustworthiness of your reporting, and again, you can reach wider audience even in mainstream languages with published in French and so forth.
Yeah. I've actually got a question. I'd like to steer the conversation towards ethical journalism, and I was wondering, what are the initiatives that are being taken, from all of your organizations in order to address that issue, in terms of, when we have AI technology and algorithms as a key player now, what are the initiatives that are being taken in order to ensure ethical journalism?
I'll take the question. I think no matter how the news industry goes, and the core value is never changed, I would believe on balanced report, facts checking, and for the human goods, for the public goods. But on the other side, I think when there is regulations by the European Union, there is abandon from the Italy government to the ChatGPT, and we must respect all the, I think different countries have their different choices for the ethnic regulations on the news production based on their own situation of the country. But if we create something that can create value for I'd rather say our users instead of consumers. For the users, according to the demographics by the CGTN, we have this 18 to 34 age groups, and 90%, 70% of them are men worldwide. And we have this from 180 countries, over 500 international talents working for CGTN, and we grab all the news. We actually sending out 400 pieces of news every day as an organization, news organization, including half and half, like 60% of it's a global news. And previously we shared the same goal as Thai PBS. I talked with the Director General, and she said her ultimate goal, her ambitious is to become a global brand for representing the voice of Thai, which is our ambition as well. But now we change a little bit, is that we want to be supplying some public goods in the information area that people can verify by their own judgment, that they can see that how China, how world goes another way around. That's why our motto is called See the Difference with CGTN. So I think for the digital area, for the ethnic of news, that we respect the diversity and we long for the new, the real truth of the news backwards. Right.
Have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I agree that there are core journalism ethics that play into, like regardless of what all the tools are, you have to do rigorous checking of everything that every piece of news that you get. So at RFA, we actually get a lot of videos from citizen journalists because we're known for being, the independent journalists in many of these countries that will, get the truth out and give people a voice. So for example, we actually were given a cell phone from that was just found on the street in Myanmar that was dropped by a Burmese soldier. And it had, it was like selfies of him with sort of mutilated bodies that, he had people that he had killed and videos. And we had to really check that, this was a real cell phone. We did data stamping and looking at where these were located, and saw that there was actually a massacre in the village where, where the cell phone, where the person had taken these videos. So that kind of verification is something that will not change, but it gets increasingly difficult depending on all of these different methods of altering videos or images or whatever. I would say also, I think the idea of media literacy cannot be understated. I think it's so important. And I think that there is some responsibility that is not just among journalists themselves, but among social media companies. I think there should be more regulation. I think there should, social media companies should be actually taking down, images, videos, posts that are that have been proven to be disinformation. So that's what I.
Sure, Essel.
Yeah, as a non-expert, but again, sharing my personal view. Before we talk about the ethical journalism, I think we need to understand where AI ethics, bias, and governance, where it comes from the LLMs, right? Large language models. And I would agree exactly who's responsible for the LLMs. It's always who guards the guardians. This is like a rhetoric question. Is it the person who is training the models? Is it the person who is labeling data? Is it the software engineer? Who will be responsible when the data already out from the lab and reaches us, right? So the biggest problem right now, out of all the other problems we have in LLM development and bringing it to the market, is actually algorithmic bias. So the algorithms really represent how unfair our world is. So for example, if I tell you, I'm training people in Singapore and in Asia, so that's my major market. 12 months ago, I could, and disability inclusion and generally DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is a huge part of what I do. If 12 months ago, I could tweak the way I train my machine, ChatGPT or Copilot or Google Gemini, whatever you're using, I could say, yes, this is the program I want to do, and please tweak it according to the participants that have, for example, dyslexia, right? And I have exact statistics of the participants from program to program that have certain needs. Usually it's special education needs. It would be tweaked in a way that I would say, oh, sorry, I'm not authorized to give you this data because I'm just a large language model. But in the beginning, if you used in the first 6 months, if you were the early adopter of the technology, it would give you a very different answer. It will be a very detailed answer. But because there was so much, there was so many problems with the bias and discrimination, actually, if we say just openly, in the models itself. So of course, at the onset of it, algorithmic bias is where it is. A second thing, I think it's not really a journalistic issue, but I think the governments are working on that, companies are working, but this is something we're also working on, is something that to bring Western-centric LLMs and make our own Asian right here for the region. I can speak for Singapore because this is where I live. Singapore is working on the ASEAN version, which is called Sea Lion, and there is a separate government agency, IMDA, which is responsible on the accuracy of the, so it's AI verify. So how do you verify that the LLM is actually trustworthy, right?
Yeah, we're almost out of time. Is there anything that you would like to add in terms of the future? What's next?
I was just wondering, any of you consider of global digital governance, despite all the diversities and differences between the countries and between the ethnic group, between the news values, between the judgment, everything, but for our human beings, because once I hear an interview by a Fox News anchor to Musk, and saying that it's the AI will ruin our human beings. And he said definitely the only thing we can do is unplug the cloud computing and then maybe save our human beings. So before we've been really, that's, I think it's 90%, 99% possibility lies in the future. I mean, in 5 years' time, who knows?
Yeah. And Joe, lucky last, anything to add before we conclude?
Well, no, so I agree with everything that was said. I just want to quickly note, because UNESCO has developed the first international normative instrument for the ethics of AI, including how it impacts media. And last year, we worked with the social media companies and received also 10,000 contributions from non-social media companies from 134 countries to develop over 18 months our guidelines for social media. I wish I could get into that, but I won't. And then this question of algorithms, I just think it's a very important question existentially, and just understanding how to escape the dependence on algorithms should be a big part of discussion, and probably it was, and I probably unfortunately missed it. But as you know, every single tweak to an algorithm can have an existential impact for news content providers. And news content providers, I mean, you feel you're earning your views because of the quality of your content, and it's true, it's true. But traffic is part of the traffic is because of the weight or bias of an algorithm. And why that matters in sort of this historical picture is because sort of in the Web 2.0 milieu, you know, as you know, social media captured ad revenue because they're really, really good at it. And sort of the sidebar of that is that it's going to be very difficult to compete against big technology, this type of oligopoly in terms of their access to data, their access to compute, and their access to programmers. But yeah, okay, I'm just going to close this paragraph. What I would say is that, yeah, so what happened very obviously is that companies like Meta suddenly pulled out their news feeds, you know, and this has crushed a lot of companies. You know this. There are several reasons. I mean, from their perspective, several reasons, which is that countries were making legislation requiring you pay for news links, and at the same time, users of Instagram, Meta, were saying news feeds are polarizing. There's political polarization in them. So they said, okay, fine. That's what happened. An algorithm tweak, and suddenly the hose turned off for a lot of companies. And that's where we are now. And then you have Chat GPT, which provides this new revenue model that was unexpected, this sort of licensing of content. But it's a Faustian type of proposition in the sense that ChatGPT can easily jump paywalls, and it's doing two things, but it's scraping all your intellectual property, and at the same time, it's producing content that's very, very similar. That's the challenge. So it's ultimately an algorithmic challenge.
Yeah. I reckon we're all aware of the challenges now. The next question is basically, how are we going to address those challenges? As long as we're aware of it, I think, I don't know if you agree, the future is still within our hands.
Once I was asked by the former Minister of Thai PR, Public Relations Ministry, and she asked me, Sheila, how will you verify the news on this arena with all this AI technology booming up? I said we counted on our journalists worldwide. As I said, CGTN has all this 500 journalists, and also we have this bonded relationship with Reuters, AP, AFP, and also over 1,000 prestigious news companies, media organizations together. So we actually, let me do a little bit of advisement. We welcome all the further bonded with
time, but
yeah, I know. Work with CGTN and CCTV, we welcome, we respect your diversity, and we welcome all the content that can pull into CGTN's website and our other platforms, including television, radio, everything. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much to my panelists and to all the speakers today, and all of you for participating in today's Global News Forum. Thank you so much. We're going to take a group photo. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your experiences and insights. Thank you. Thank you very much. Would you like to come? Yes? Well, that's it for this afternoon, but not for today, because we have our annual Asiavision Gala Awards at 7 p.m. and it's going to be fun and exciting. So we look forward to seeing you back in this room at 7 p.m. And please take your belongings as well, because they're going to be rearranging the room for the dinner. Thank you very much, and we'll see you back at 7 p.m. Thanks. ยังไงนะ